What happens when the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories discovers that his greatest enemy isn't another pack, but his own blood? Ronan Blackwood ruled through fear and dominance for 15 years, until a curse began turning his wolf against him. Now, as his strength drains away and rival packs smell weakness, he'll uncover a betrayal so close it will shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, power, and what it truly means to lead. Stay until the end to see how one brutal choice changes everything. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday. Ronan Blackwood woke up tasting copper. Not the clean, sharp tang of fresh blood from a hunt. This was wrong. Rotten. Like something had died inside his mouth and been left to decay. He sat up in the darkness of his quarters, the massive timber frame room silent except for the pop and hiss of dying embers in the stone fireplace. His hand went to his throat, fingers pressing against the pulse point. Steady, strong, normal. So why did his wolf feel like it was trying to claw its way out through his ribcage? Not now, he thought, forcing his breathing to slow. Not today. He had a tribunal at dawn. 3 pack members accused of stealing from the winter stores. The punishment would be severe. It had to be. The Blackwood pack didn't tolerate theft, and Ronan Blackwood didn't tolerate challenges to his authority. He'd built his reputation on being uncompromising, brutal when necessary, fair but only just. The other alphas in the Northern Territories called him a tyrant. Let them. Their packs were soft, fractured by sentiment and democratic nonsense. His pack was strong, unified. They feared him, yes, but they also followed him without question. Or at least they had. Ronan stood, muscles protesting more than they should have. He was 34, prime age for an alpha. He should have felt invincible. Instead, he felt tired. The cold stone floor bit into his bare feet as he crossed to the window. Outside, the Blackwood compound sprawled across the valley, a collection of timber lodges, training grounds, and workshops, all surrounded by a perimeter of ancient pines. Beyond that, the northern mountains rose like jagged teeth against the pre-dawn sky. His territory, his pack, his responsibility, and something was poisoning it from the inside. He could feel it at the way pack members had started avoiding his gaze during communal meals, in the whispers that stopped abruptly when he entered a room, in the way even his beta, Marcus, had taken to choosing his words too carefully, like he was speaking to a volatile stranger instead of the alpha he'd served for 12 years. Ronan's reflection stared back at him from the darkened window glass. A tall man with shoulders like a linebacker, hair dark enough to blend with midnight, and eyes that had gone from sharp gray to something harder, colder. He barely recognized himself anymore. The copper taste flooded his mouth again, and this time it came with pain, a sharp, vicious twist in his gut that made him double over, one hand braced against the window frame. What the hell? His wolf surged forward, not in the smooth transition he'd mastered at 16, but in a violent lurch that felt like his skeleton was trying to rearrange itself against his will. Ronan gritted his teeth, forcing it back down through sheer willpower. Control, he told himself. You control the wolf, not the other way around. But for the first time in 18 years, he wasn't entirely sure that was true. The pain subsided slowly, leaving him sweating and shaking. He straightened with effort, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. When he pulled it away, his palm was smeared with dark blood. Shit. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the evidence of something he didn't understand and couldn't control. Then he wiped his hand on his sleep pants and turned away from the window. He had a tribunal to oversee. Whatever this was, it could wait. The great hall smelled like pine smoke and wet fur. Ronan took his seat in the carved oak chair at the head of the room, not quite a throne, but close enough, and surveyed the assembled pack. 63 members in total, ranging from children barely old enough to shift to elders who remembered when his father had ruled. They filled the benches on either side of the center aisle, silent and watchful. Marcus stood to Ronan's right, a compact man in his 40s with graying temples and the kind of scarred knuckles that came from decades of enforcement. On Ronan's left stood Elena, the pack's third, and the only person who'd ever dared tell Ronan he was being an ass to his face. The accused knelt in the center of the hall, wrists bound with silver-threaded rope that burned against shifter skin. 3 young males, early 20s, all from families that had served the pack for generations. Ronan knew their names, their parents, their rankings in the pack hierarchy. He was about to destroy their lives anyway. Jonas Kerr, David March, Tyler Voss. His voice carried through the hall without effort, cold and precise. You stand accused of stealing preserved meat from the winter stores, supplies meant to feed the entire pack during lean months. How do you plead? Jonas, the oldest of the three, lifted his head. His face was bruised, Marcus's work during the initial interrogation. We were hungry, Alpha. Everyone gets hungry, Ronan said. That's not an excuse for theft. We've been on half rations for 6 weeks, David cut in, the words tumbling out in a rush. The hunting parties keep coming back empty. We thought we just needed... You thought you deserved more than the pack provided. Ronan leaned forward slightly. You thought you were special, that the rules didn't apply to you. No, Alpha, that's not... Silence! The command cracked through the hall like a whip. David's mouth snapped shut, his body going rigid with the force of Ronan's dominance. This was the power that kept the pack in line. The Alpha's will, enforced through the pack bond that connected them all. Most of the time, Ronan barely had to use it. His reputation was usually enough, but lately he'd been using it more and more. The punishment for theft is exile, Ronan continued. You'll be stripped of your pack bonds and escorted beyond the northern border by dawn tomorrow. You have until then to gather whatever you can carry. A collective intake of breath rippled through the assembled pack. Exile was a death sentence for most shifters. Cut off from the pack bond, cast out into territory controlled by rivals or rogues. Few survived more than a season. Jonas's mother stood up from her bench, an older woman with iron-gray hair. Alpha, please. They made a mistake, but they're young. Let them make amends. Let them... They stole from the pack. Ronan's gaze cut to her and she flinched. Would you have me show mercy? Set a precedent that theft is forgivable if you're young or hungry or scared? I would have you show wisdom, she said, and the hall went deadly quiet. No one challenged an Alpha in open tribunal. Ever. Ronan stood slowly, the movement drawing every eye in the room. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, eager for violence, for the chance to remind this woman, to remind all of them, exactly who held the power here. You think I lack wisdom? I think... Her voice wavered, but she held her ground. I think my son made a terrible choice. But I also think 6 weeks of half rations means something's wrong with the pack's supply chain, not just 3 hungry boys. Murmurs of agreement scattered through the crowd. Soft, barely audible. But there. Ronan felt it like a physical blow, the slight but unmistakable weakening of the pack bond. The beginning of fracture. Marcus cleared his throat quietly. Alpha, if I may. You may not. Ronan didn't look at his beta. His attention was fixed on Jonas's mother, on the first real challenge to his authority in years. The supply issues are being addressed. That doesn't excuse theft. Of course not, Alpha. Elena spoke up from his left, her tone carefully neutral. But perhaps we could consider alternative punishment? Doubled work details? Restrictions on hunting rights? I've made my judgment. The words came out harder than he'd intended, and he saw Elena's jaw tighten in response. That copper taste flooded his mouth again. Ronan swallowed it down, refusing to show weakness in front of the pack. The sentence stands, he said. Exile at dawn. Tribunal dismissed. He turned and walked toward the rear exit before anyone could respond, before anyone could see the tremor in his hands or the blood he could feel gathering in the back of his throat. He made it to his private office before the pain hit again, worse this time, driving him to his knees on the floor. His vision grayed at the edges. His wolf thrashed against his control, not trying to shift but trying to break free, like something was pulling them apart from the inside. Ronan? Marcus. Of course. His beta had followed him. Ronan forced himself upright, one hand braced against his desk. I'm fine. You're bleeding. I said I'm fine. Marcus closed the door behind him, shutting them in together. He'd been Ronan's beta long enough to know when an order was real and when it was bullshit. What's happening to you? Nothing. Don't lie to me. Marcus moved closer, and there was genuine concern in his eyes, the kind of concern that made Ronan's chest tighten with an emotion he didn't want to name. You've been off for weeks. The pack's noticed. I've noticed. And now you're coughing up blood during tribunal. Ronan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. More blood, darker this time. It's nothing, probably just... Just what? You're the strongest alpha in the Northern Territories. You don't get sick, you don't weaken. Marcus's voice dropped. Unless something's making you weak. The word hung between them like an accusation. Weak. Ronan had built his entire identity on being the opposite of that word. Strong, unyielding, in control. I'll handle it, he said. How? I don't know yet. The words came out as a snarl, and Marcus took an involuntary step back. Ronan forced himself to breathe, to pull back the dominance that had flared hot and aggressive. I don't know, but I will. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. Elena thinks you were too harsh with the tribunal. Elena can think whatever she wants. Half the pack thinks you were too harsh. Ronan's head snapped up. Half? You exiled 3 kids for stealing food during supply shortages. What did you expect? I expected loyalty. Ronan moved around his desk, putting the solid oak between them like a barrier. I expected the pack to trust that I know what I'm doing. They used to. Marcus's tone was careful again, measured. But lately, you've been different, harder, less willing to listen. I'm the alpha. I don't need to listen. I need to lead. Leading means knowing when to show strength and when to show mercy. Don't quote my father at me. Marcus's expression flickered with something that might have been pity. Someone needs to, because right now you're acting more like a tyrant than an alpha. The words hit like a physical blow. Ronan felt his wolf surge forward again, this time with genuine rage, and for a second he wanted nothing more than to show Marcus exactly what a tyrant looked like, to remind him through blood and dominance who held the power here. But then the pain came back, sharp and vicious, and all that rage collapsed into something closer to fear. Because Marcus was right. Something was wrong. Something fundamental and terrifying, and Ronan had no idea how to fix it. Get out, he said quietly. Marcus hesitated. Ronan, I said get out. This time the beta obeyed. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Ronan alone in his office with blood on his lips and a wolf that felt more like an enemy than a part of himself. He slumped into his chair, head falling back against the leather. Outside, he could hear the pack beginning their daily routines. The clang of weapons in the training yard, the low rumble of conversation from the communal kitchen, the sharp bark of laughter from somewhere near the perimeter. Normal sounds. Pack sounds. Everything was falling apart, and they didn't even know it yet. The healers' quarters smelled like dried herbs and disappointment. Ronan had waited until nightfall to visit, slipping through the compound under cover of darkness like a coward. He told himself it was strategic. No need to worry the pack unnecessarily. But the truth was simpler and more humiliating. He didn't want anyone to see him asking for help. Clara, the pack healer, looked up from her workbench when he entered. She was old enough to have served under Ronan's father, a tiny woman with white hair and fingers stained permanent yellow from decades of grinding herbs and mixing tinctures. Alpha. She didn't sound surprised. I wondered when you'd come. Ronan closed the door behind him. You knew? I'm not blind, boy. She gestured to a stool near her workbench. Sit down before you fall down. He sat, mostly because his legs felt like they might give out anyway. How long have you known? 3 weeks, give or take. She moved around him with the efficiency of someone who'd examined hundreds of shifters over the years, her cool fingers pressing against the glands in his neck, checking his eyes, listening to his breathing. Started subtle. Weight loss? Fatigue? Then came the blood. What is it? Clara didn't answer right away. She pulled a small vial from a shelf, uncorked it, and held it under his nose. Smell that. Ronan inhaled automatically, and immediately wished he hadn't. The scent was wrong, twisted like rot and flowers mixed together. His wolf recoiled violently. What the hell is that? Nightsbane. Clara corked the vial and set it aside. A plant that grows in the deep forests. Extremely rare, extremely toxic to shifters. Ronan's hands clenched on his knees. You think someone poisoned me? I think someone cursed you. The word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of impossible through everything Ronan thought he knew about the world. Curses aren't real. Clara gave him a look that suggested she thought he was an idiot. You can turn into a wolf, but curses are where you draw the line. That's different. Ronan stopped because he didn't have a good argument. Who would curse me? That's a better question. She moved back to her workbench, pulling out leather-bound books that looked older than the compound itself. Curses require power, knowledge, and most importantly, a connection to the target. A connection? Blood, usually. Someone from your bloodline or someone bound to it through magic or ritual. She flipped through one of the books, squinting at faded text. The symptoms you're describing, the physical deterioration, the loss of control over your wolf, the blood, they're consistent with a death curse. Something designed to drain your strength slowly while turning your own nature against you. Ronan felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. How long? Until what? Until it kills me. Clara looked at him over the top of her spectacles. You've got maybe 6 weeks. 8 if you're lucky. Less if you keep burning energy the way you have been. Tribunals, dominance displays, all that alpha posturing. 6 weeks. The number seemed absurd. Impossible. Ronan had survived challenges from rogues, territory disputes with rival packs, a border war that had lasted 3 years. He'd taken injuries that should have killed him and walked away with nothing but new scars. And now some invisible curse was going to take him down in 6 weeks. Can you break it? He asked. No. She closed the book with a heavy thump. I'm a healer, not a witch. I can treat symptoms, make you more comfortable, but the curse itself? She shook her head. That's beyond me. Then who? Clara was quiet for a long moment, her expression troubled. Finally she said, There are rumors. Stories passed down through the healing circles about people who deal in this kind of magic. Most of them are charlatans or madmen, but there's one name that keeps coming up. Who? Seraphine Vale. The name meant nothing to Ronan. He waited. She's a recluse, Clara continued, lives somewhere in the forbidden lands beyond the eastern border. They say she can break impossible curses, cure diseases that have no cure, see things that haven't happened yet. She paused. They also say no one who asks for her help survives paying the price. What price? I don't know. The stories never get that specific. Clara pulled off her spectacles, cleaning them on her apron with slow, methodical movements. But curses have rules, Ronan. Breaking one requires balance, something given for something taken. Usually, the cost is... She trailed off. Is what? High. Ronan stood up, the movement too fast, making his vision swim. Where do I find her? You don't. Clara's voice was sharp. You heard what I said. No one survives. Going to her is suicide. Staying here is suicide. At least with her, I've got a chance. Do you? She moved to block his path to the door, this tiny old woman who barely came up to his chest, looking at him like he was a foolish child. Or are you just running towards something because standing still feels like giving up? The words hit closer to home than Ronan wanted to admit. He stepped around her, hand on the door handle. Where in the Forbidden Lands? Clara sighed, defeated. There's a village called Ashwood, right at the edge of the eastern border. If anyone knows how to find Seraphine Vale, it'll be the people there. She paused. But Ronan? Be careful. The Forbidden Lands earned their name for a reason. And if you go in there weakened, I'll manage. Your pride is going to get you killed. Ronan opened the door, letting in the cold night air. Probably. But at least I'll die trying instead of withering away in my own territory. He left before she could argue further, slipping back through the compound toward his quarters. The moon was up now, nearly full, casting silver light across the valley. In the distance, he could hear wolves singing, pack members out on patrol, their voices rising and falling in the complex harmonies that spoke of territory and belonging. His pack, his responsibility. And if he died, it would all fall apart. Marcus would try to hold it together, probably. He was a good beta, strong and loyal, but he wasn't an alpha. The pack needed someone who could enforce dominance, maintain order, keep the rival territories at bay. Without that, they'd be absorbed within a year, scattered or slaughtered. Ronan made it to his quarters and immediately started gathering supplies. Dried meat, water skins, a hunting knife, warm clothes. He moved on autopilot, his mind already racing ahead to the journey east. He'd leave at dawn. Tell Marcus he was scouting the northern border, checking for rogue activity. It would buy him maybe 3 days before anyone started asking serious questions. 3 days to find Ashwood, locate this Seraphine Vale, and convince her to break a curse that was slowly killing him from the inside. Simple. His wolf stirred restlessly, and this time Ronan didn't try to force it down. He let the sensation wash over him, the wrongness of it, the way his own nature felt foreign and hostile. Someone did this to me, he thought. Someone from my bloodline. The list of possibilities was short. His parents were dead, he had no children, which left... A knock at the door interrupted the thought. Ronan turned, hand automatically going to the knife at his belt. Come in. The door opened and Kael stepped inside. His younger brother looked tired, dark circles under eyes that were the same gray as Ronan's but somehow softer. He was built leaner too, more runner than fighter, with their mother's sharp cheekbones and their father's stubborn jaw. Heard you went to see Clara, Kael said. Ronan's grip on the knife tightened fractionally before he forced himself to relax. News travels fast. It's a pack compound. Everything travels fast. Kael closed the door behind him, leaning against it with studied casualness. What did she say? That I need to take it easier, less stress. The lie came smoothly, practiced. Kael's expression suggested he didn't believe a word of it. Right, and that's why you're packing supplies for a trip? Damn it. Northern Border Patrol, Ronan said. Been getting reports of rogue activity. Marcus didn't mention anything about rogue activity at this morning's briefing, because I haven't told him yet. They stared at each other across the small room, and Ronan felt the weight of all the things they'd never said to each other, years of rivalry and resentment wrapped up in the roles they'd been born into. Ronan, the firstborn, the heir, the alpha. Kael, the spare, the younger son who'd never quite measured up. Their father had been brutal about it too, making it clear from the time they could walk that only one of them would inherit the pack. And it wasn't going to be the sensitive one who preferred books to bloodshed. Ronan had tried, in his own way, to make it easier. Gave Kael responsibilities within the pack, made him head of supply logistics, included him in important decisions. But you couldn't make someone an alpha who wasn't born to it. And you couldn't erase years of their father's favoritism with a few sympathetic gestures. You're lying to me, Kael said quietly. I'm protecting you. From what? From the truth that someone cursed me and the most likely suspect is standing right in front of me. But Ronan didn't say that. Because despite everything, despite the rivalry and the resentment and the curse eating him alive, Kael was still his brother. From things you don't need to worry about, he said instead. Kael pushed off from the door, moving closer. We used to tell each other everything. When did that stop? When we grew up. No. Kael's voice was soft but firm. When you became alpha, when you decided you had to do everything alone because asking for help would make you look weak. I am alpha. Being weak isn't an option. Everyone needs help sometimes, Ronan. Not me. The words came out colder than he'd intended, and he saw Kael flinch, saw the hurt flash across his brother's face before it was hidden behind careful neutrality. Right, Kael said. Of course not. The great Ronan Blackwood, who needs no one and nothing. He turned toward the door. Good luck with your patrol. Try not to get yourself killed. He left before Ronan could respond, the door closing with a quiet click that felt louder than a slam. Ronan stood there in the silence, surrounded by half-packed supplies and the lingering scent of his brother's hurt feelings, and wondered, not for the first time, if being alpha was worth the cost of everything else. Then he tasted copper again, felt his wolf twist against his control like something trying to tear free, and knew he didn't have the luxury of wondering. He had 6 weeks to live. And somewhere in the Forbidden Lands, a woman named Seraphine Vale held the only chance he had of surviving long enough to fix the fractures tearing his pack apart from the inside. Ronan finished packing in grim silence, checking his supplies twice before securing the pack. The knife went on his belt, within easy reach. He pulled on his heavy coat, wolf gray wool lined with fur, and stood at the window one last time, looking out over the compound. His pack, his territory, his legacy. If he failed, it would all burn. But if he stayed and did nothing, the result would be the same. Someone from your bloodline, Clara had said. Ronan looked at the door Kael had just walked through and felt the first cold fingers of suspicion wrap around his heart. Then he turned away, extinguished the lamp, and began planning the lies he'd need to tell at dawn to buy himself enough time to reach Ashwood alive. Outside, wolves were still singing to the moon, haunting and beautiful and utterly oblivious to the fact that their alpha was dying and their world was about to collapse. Ronan listened to them for a long moment, committing the sound to memory. Then he closed the window, locked the door, and tried to sleep despite knowing that his dreams would be full of blood and betrayal and the slow, inevitable rot of power turning against itself. Dawn would come soon enough, and with it, the beginning of a journey that would either save his pack or destroy everything he'd spent 15 years building. Ronan left before the compound woke, slipping past the perimeter guards while the sky was still more black than gray. He told Marcus through a hastily scrawled note that he'd be gone 3 days, maybe 4, checking reports of rogue movement near the northern passes. It was plausible enough. Marcus would believe it because he wanted to believe it, because the alternative, that his alpha was lying to him, was too destabilizing to consider. The guilt sat heavy in Ronan's chest as he moved through the forest, but he pushed it down alongside everything else he couldn't afford to feel right now. Guilt was a luxury for people who had time. He had 6 weeks, maybe less. The eastern route took him through territory he hadn't traveled in years, not since the border disputes with the Crane Pack had finally been settled through a combination of strategic marriages and thinly veiled threats. The land here was wilder, the trees older and more densely packed, their roots creating a maze that required careful navigation even in daylight. Ronan moved fast despite the terrain, his wolf lending him speed and sure-footedness even as it continued to feel wrong beneath his skin. Like wearing a coat that didn't quite fit anymore, seams pulling in places that should have been comfortable. By midday, the copper taste was back. He stopped to drink from a stream, cupping the icy water in his hands and rinsing his mouth until it ran clear. It didn't help. The taste lingered, metallic and rotten, a constant reminder that something inside him was breaking down. He forced himself to eat dried meat that tasted like ash, and kept moving. The forbidden lands weren't marked by signs or fences. Instead, the boundary revealed itself through absence. The bird calls stopped first, then the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. The trees grew twisted here, their bark blackened as though by old fires, branches reaching toward the sky in shapes that looked almost deliberate, almost purposeful. The air felt different too, heavier, like the atmosphere before a storm, charged with potential violence. Ronan's wolf went quiet, instinctively recognizing danger even if it couldn't identify the source. He welcomed the silence. At least when the wolf was quiet, it wasn't trying to tear its way out of his ribcage. He found Ashwood just before sunset. The village was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 24 structures clustered around a central square, all built from the same dark wood as the twisted trees. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and he could see movement through lit windows, but there was no one outside. No children playing, no adults going about evening chores. It looked like a place holding its breath. Ronan approached slowly, hands visible and empty despite the knife at his belt. The last thing he needed was to get shot by a nervous villager before he even had a chance to ask about Seraphine Vale. "That's far enough." The voice came from his left. Ronan turned to find an old man standing in the doorway of the nearest building, a rifle pointed steadily at Ronan's chest. He was thin to the point of gaunt, with skin like old leather and eyes that had seen too much. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Ronan said, keeping his voice level and non-threatening. "People who aren't here to cause trouble don't usually come to Ashwood." The old man didn't lower the rifle. "Especially not shifters. So much for subtle. I'm looking for someone." "We don't know anyone." "You haven't heard who I'm looking for yet." "Doesn't matter. Answer's still no." The old man jerked his chin toward the tree line. "Turn around and go back where you came from. Nothing for you here." Ronan took a careful step forward. The rifle didn't waver. "I'm looking for Seraphine Vale." The old man's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "Never heard of her." "I think you have." "I think you should leave before I put a hole in you." "I'm dying." The words came out blunt, stripped of pride or pretense. "Someone cursed me. I've got maybe 6 weeks left, and Seraphine Vale is the only person who might be able to break it." The old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he lowered the rifle, but only slightly. If you're dying anyway, why waste what time you've got left chasing fairy tales? Because I have people depending on me. A pack. And if I die, they fall apart. That's not really my problem. No, Ronan agreed. It's not. But you know where she is, and I need you to tell me. And if I don't? Ronan met his eyes steadily. Then I'll find someone else who will. I'll tear this village apart asking questions until someone breaks. And I'll do it knowing that every minute I waste here is a minute closer to death, which means I've got very little to lose and even less patience. It wasn't a threat exactly, just a statement of fact delivered with the kind of calm certainty that came from being an alpha for 15 years. The kind of certainty that said he meant every word and had the capability to follow through. The old man studied him for another long moment. Then he sighed, lowering the rifle completely. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Seraphine doesn't see just anyone, and the one she does see, he trailed off, shaking his head. You heard the stories? Some of them. Then you know what you're walking into. I know the price is supposed to be high, Ronan said. I'm willing to pay it. That's what they all say. The old man turned and disappeared into his house, returning a moment later with a piece of charcoal and a scrap of bark. He drew quickly, sketching out a rough map. 3 miles northeast. There's a clearing with a standing stone at the center. Wait there at midnight. If she's interested, she'll come. And if she's not, then you wasted a night in the woods and you're back where you started. He held out the bark. But I'll tell you the same thing I've told the other fools who've come looking for her. Turning back now would be smarter. Ronan took the map, studying the crude landmarks. How many others? Over the years, maybe 24. The old man's expression was grim. None of them came back. Did any of them survive? Don't know. But I'd say the odds aren't in your favor. He stepped back into his doorway, reaching for the rifle again. Now get out of my village before the others see you. We don't need the kind of attention a shifter brings. Ronan nodded his thanks and turned to go. He'd made it maybe 10 steps when the old man called out again. Hey! Ronan looked back. Whatever she asks for. The old man's voice was quiet. Think real hard before you say yes. Because once you agree, there's no taking it back. Ronan didn't answer. He just lifted the map in acknowledgement and headed into the darkening forest, following the landmarks sketched on the bark. 3 miles wasn't far. He could have made it in under an hour if he pushed, but he forced himself to move slowly, conserving energy, because he didn't know what he'd be walking into, and the last thing he needed was to arrive at this meeting already exhausted. The forest grew darker as night fell, the twisted trees blocking out even the faint light from the rising moon. Ronan's wolf stirred restlessly, uneasy with the wrongness of this place. He could feel it too, a pressure in the air that had nothing to do with weather, like reality was thinner here, more permeable. The clearing appeared suddenly, opening up in front of him like a mouth. The standing stone at its center was massive, easily twice his height, covered in markings that might have been language or might have been random scratches worn by time and weather. It looked old, ancient, the kind of old that made Ronan's wolf want to tuck its tail and run. He checked his watch. 11:30, half an hour to wait. Ronan settled himself against the base of the stone, back pressed to the cold rock, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Tried not to think about the fact that he was trusting his life to rumors and desperate hope. Tried not to think about Kael's hurt expression, or Marcus's growing suspicion, or the pack members he'd exiled for stealing food during supply shortages. Tried not to think about the fact that someone from his own bloodline had cursed him to die. The copper taste flooded his mouth again. Ronan spat blood onto the ground and watched it disappear into the dark earth. Charming. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, feminine and sharp-edged. Ronan was on his feet in an instant, knife drawn, searching the clearing. Nothing. You can put that away. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already. Show yourself. Ronan kept the knife up, scanning the tree line. So demanding. Is that how you address everyone, or just the people trying to help you? I don't know that you're trying to help me yet. A figure stepped out from behind the standing stone. Impossible, because Ronan's back had been against that stone, and he would have felt someone approach. She was tall and slim, wrapped in layers of dark fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her face was sharp and angular, with eyes that caught the moonlight like a cat's. Seraphine Vale. She looked younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, but something about the way she moved suggested age that had nothing to do with years lived. Ronan Blackwood, she said, and it wasn't a question. The great alpha of the Northern Territories, reduced to begging in forbidden lands. I'm not begging. No? She circled him slowly, studying him the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. Then what are you doing? Looking for answers. Answers to what? Who cursed me? How to break it? How much time I actually have left? He lowered the knife slightly. Can you help or not? Seraphine stopped circling, standing directly in front of him now. Up close, he could see that her eyes weren't actually catching moonlight. They were glowing faintly with their own luminescence. I can help. The question is whether you can afford my price. Name it. Oh, I will. But first... She reached out faster than he could react, her fingers pressing against the pulse point in his throat. The touch burned cold, and Ronan felt his wolf recoil violently. Interesting. The curse is old magic, blood magic, and it's wrapped tight around your bloodline. Can you break it? Yes. She pulled her hand back, and Ronan had to fight the urge to rub at the spot where she'd touched him. It felt frozen. But breaking it requires a price, a life for a life. That's the rule with blood curses. What does that mean? It means someone has to die for you to live. She said it casually, like she was discussing the weather. The curse was cast by someone bound to your bloodline, family most likely. To break it, another life bound to that same bloodline must be offered in exchange. The words hit like a physical blow. You're saying I have to kill someone in my family? I'm saying the curse requires balance. A life was used to create it. A life must be used to break it. Seraphine's glowing eyes fixed on his. Who that life belongs to is up to you. Ronan's mind raced. His parents were dead. He had no children, which left my brother. Is he the one who cursed you? I don't know. The admission tasted bitter. Maybe. Then perhaps killing him would be justice as well as necessity. Seraphine moved away, walking a slow circle around the standing stone. But there's more you should know before you agree to anything. What? The person who cast this curse knew what they were doing. This isn't amateur work. Whoever they are, they wanted you dead slowly, painfully, with time to watch everything you've built crumble around you. She paused. That takes a special kind of hatred, the kind that usually comes from family. Ronan thought about Kyle, about all the years of being second best, of watching their father choose Ronan over and over again, about the resentment that had built between them like a wall neither knew how to scale. Had that resentment turned to hatred, to murder? How do I know for sure who cast it? You confront them, watch their reaction. A curse caster can't hide what they've done, not from a direct accusation. Their power will respond to yours. Recognize it. Seraphine turned to face him. But you need to be certain before you act. Kill the wrong person and the curse won't break. You'll just have committed murder for nothing. And if I refuse, if I won't trade a life for mine, then you die in 6 weeks. Maybe less, given how hard you're pushing yourself. She tilted her head, studying him. Your pack will fall apart. Rival territories will move in. Everything you've spent 15 years building will disappear like smoke. It wasn't a threat, just a clinical assessment of reality. Ronan felt something cold settle in his chest. What's your price for helping me identify the caster and perform the ritual? Ah, now we get to it. Seraphine's smile was sharp. My price is simple. When the time comes to break the curse, when you're standing over the person who has to die, I want you to remember that choice. Remember what you were willing to do to survive, and I want you to live with that knowledge for the rest of your life. That's it? That's it. No gold, no territory, no promises of future service, just the weight of what you're about to do. Her eyes seemed to glow brighter. Most people think they can live with that. Most people are wrong. Ronan looked at her for a long moment, weighing the offer against the alternatives. He could go back home, tell the pack the truth, and hope they rallied around him in his final weeks. But rally to do what? Die watching? Hope for a miracle? Or he could do this. Find out who cursed him. Make them pay for it, and save his pack in the process. When he put it that way, there wasn't really a choice at all. I agree to your terms. Are you sure? Because once we start this, there's no stopping halfway. I'm sure. Seraphine studied him for another moment, then nodded. All right then. We begin tomorrow. Meet me here at dawn. And Ronan? She started to fade back into the shadows, her form becoming indistinct. Prepare yourself. The answers you find might be worse than the questions. Then she was gone, disappeared into the darkness like she'd never been there at all. Ronan stood alone in the clearing, the standing stone cold at his back, and tried not to think about what he'd just agreed to. Tried not to think about the possibility that his own brother had tried to murder him. Tried not to think about the fact that if it was true, he'd have to kill Kyle to survive. He made camp at the edge of the clearing, too wired to sleep, but too exhausted to keep moving. The night sounds of the Forbidden Lands were different from his territory. Fewer animal calls, more wind moving through twisted branches with a sound like whispered conversation. Ronan lay on his back, staring up at the canopy, and let himself acknowledge the fear he'd been pushing down for weeks. He was terrified, not of dying. He'd made peace with his own mortality years ago, but of dying badly, of leaving the pack vulnerable, of all his work, all his sacrifices, all the hard choices he'd made as alpha, amounting to nothing because he hadn't seen the threat coming from inside his own bloodline. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Signal was spotty out here, but apparently good enough for a text to get through. Marcus. Where are you? Real answer this time. Ronan stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Handling it. Trust me. The response came almost immediately. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, the pack's restless. Elena's asking questions. People are talking. About what? About you. About whether you're fit to lead. About what happens if you're not. The words hit harder than they should have. Ronan had known the pack was fracturing, but seeing it spelled out so bluntly made it real in a way that was hard to ignore. I'll be back in 3 days. Keep them in line until then. And if I can't? Ronan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then he typed, You will. You're my beta. Act like it. He turned off the phone before Marcus could respond, cutting off that thread of connection to home. He couldn't afford distractions right now, couldn't afford to second-guess this. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by coughing fits that left him tasting blood and dreams where his wolf tore him apart from the inside. When dawn finally broke, Ronan felt more exhausted than he had before lying down. He washed his face in the stream at the clearing's edge, the cold water shocking him into something approximating alertness. His reflection looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, skin paler than it should be, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of constant pain. He looked like a man dying slowly, because that's exactly what he was. You look terrible. Ronan turned to find Seraphine standing at the edge of the clearing, looking exactly as she had the night before. No sign of travel, no indication she'd slept rough in the woods. She looked fresh and composed, like she'd just stepped out of a comfortable home. Thanks, Ronan said dryly. I'm not complimenting you. I'm assessing your condition. She moved closer, that same clinical evaluation in her glowing eyes. The curse is accelerating, probably because you're burning energy you don't have. How much did you sleep? Enough. That's a lie, but we'll work with it. She pulled a small leather pouch from inside her layers of fabric. Drink this. It won't stop the curse, but it'll keep you functional a bit longer. Ronan eyed the pouch suspiciously. What is it? Do you really want to know, or do you want to stop feeling like death for a few hours? He took the pouch and drank without further questions. The liquid inside tasted like dirt and flowers, but the effect was almost immediate. The constant ache in his chest eased, the pressure of his wolf against his control lessened, and his vision sharpened. Better? Seraphine asked. Yes, how long will it last? 6, maybe 8 hours. Use them wisely. She started walking toward the tree line, clearly expecting him to follow. We need to get moving. The ritual to identify your curse caster requires specific materials, and we don't have much time to gather them. Ronan fell into step beside her, matching her pace through the twisted forest. What kind of materials? Blood from the standing stone, water from a source that's never seen sunlight, and ash from a fire that burned someone you loved. He processed that. How am I supposed to get ash from a fire that burned someone I loved? You tell me. Who have you lost to fire? Ronan's mind went immediately to his parents. They'd died in a territory raid 12 years ago, their bodies burned according to pack tradition. The ashes had been scattered in the pack's memorial grove. My parents. Then we'll need to visit that grove. But first, the other materials. Seraphine led him deeper into the forbidden lands, moving with the confidence of someone who'd walked these paths 1,000 times. They spent the morning gathering ingredients. The blood from the standing stone required Ronan to cut his palm and press it against specific markings on the rock, letting the ancient magic draw what it needed. The water from a sunless source turned out to be an underground spring. They reached through a narrow cave system that made Ronan's wolf scream with claustrophobia. By the time they emerged back into daylight, Ronan was exhausted again, despite Seraphine's potion. But she didn't slow down, didn't offer sympathy or rest. The memorial grove, she said. How far? 2 days' travel from here. Then we need to move fast. The full moon is in 4 days, and that's when we'll perform the identification ritual. Miss that window, and we wait another month. I don't have another month. I know. She looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. Which is why we're not stopping. They traveled hard and fast, covering ground that should have taken 3 days in just over 40 hours. Ronan pushed himself past exhaustion, past pain, past the point where his wolf was more liability than asset. Seraphine's potions kept him moving, but he could feel himself burning through reserves he didn't have. They reached the memorial grove at dusk on the second day. The grove sat at the heart of Blackwood territory, a circle of ancient trees surrounding a central fire pit where pack members came to remember their dead. Ronan hadn't been here in years. Too many memories, too much grief wrapped up in this sacred space. This is it? Seraphine asked. Ronan nodded, moving toward the fire pit. The ashes were old but never fully cleared, each new burning adding layers to what came before. He knelt beside it, hands hovering over the gray remnants. How much do you need? Just a handful. But it has to be taken by someone who loved the dead. That's you. Ronan reached into the ashes with his bare hands, scooping up a palmful of what remained of his parents and dozens of other pack members who'd died over the years. It felt wrong, sacrilegious somehow, but he forced himself to do it anyway. He was about to pour the ashes into the container Seraphine held out when he heard the voice. What the hell are you doing? Ronan's head snapped up. Marcus stood at the edge of the grove, flanked by Elena and 3 other senior pack members. They all looked furious. Marcus, don't. His beta's voice was hard. Don't lie to me again. We followed your scent from the eastern border. You weren't on patrol. You were in the forbidden lands. I can explain. Then explain why you're desecrating the memorial grove with some stranger. Marcus's hand dropped to the knife at his belt. Explain why you've been lying to the pack for days. Explain why you look like you're about to drop dead. Ronan slowly stood, still holding the ashes. Seraphine remained silent beside him, watching the confrontation with obvious interest. I'm dying, Ronan said simply. Someone cursed me. I've got maybe 4 weeks left, and this, he gestured to Seraphine, is my only chance to break it. The words landed like stones in still water. He watched the ripple of shock move through the group, Elena's hand flying to her mouth, the younger pack members exchanging horrified glances, Marcus's expression shifting from anger to something more complicated. You're serious, Marcus said. Would I be here if I wasn't? Then why not tell us? Why sneak off like a thief instead of letting the pack help? Because the curse was cast by someone in my bloodline. Ronan met his beta's eyes steadily. Someone in the pack, and until I know who, I can't trust anyone. That landed even harder. He saw Elena flinch, saw the hurt flash across Marcus's face before it hardened into something angrier. So you think one of us tried to kill you? I think someone bound to my blood tried to kill me, and the list of people who qualify is very, very short. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, voice low and dangerous, Are you accusing Kael? I'm not accusing anyone yet. That's what the ritual is for, to identify the caster. And then what? You kill them? Ronan didn't answer. Didn't need to. The silence said everything. This is insane, Elena spoke up, her voice shaking. You can't just... Ronan, you can't murder someone based on some ritual performed by a stranger in the Forbidden Lands. I can if it's the only way to save the pack. Save the pack? She laughed, the sound bitter. You're tearing it apart. You've been lying, hiding, making decisions without counsel. Because I'm Alpha. Because you're dying! The words came out as a shout. Elena's composure cracked completely, tears streaming down her face. You're dying, and you're so terrified of looking weak that you'd rather destroy everything than ask for help. The accusation hit too close to home. Ronan felt his wolf surge forward, defensive and angry, but Seraphine's hand on his arm stopped him cold. Let them speak, she said quietly. You need to hear this. I don't. You do. Ronan forced himself to take a breath, to listen. Marcus was talking now, his voice thick with emotion. You were my friend before you were my alpha. We grew up together, trained together. I stood by your side when you took leadership, and now you can't even trust me enough to tell me you're dying? It's not about trust. Then what is it about? Control? Pride? Marcus moved closer, and there were tears on his face too now. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you'd rather die alone than admit you need anyone. The words stripped Ronan bare. He stood there in the memorial grove holding ashes of the dead, confronted by the living who he'd pushed away in his desperate attempt to maintain control. And he realized Elena was right. He was tearing the pack apart himself. I'm sorry, he said, and the words felt inadequate. I thought if I could just fix this myself, everything would be okay. The pack wouldn't have to worry. You wouldn't have to. We're pack, Marcus cut him off. We're supposed to worry about each other. That's the whole point. I know, Ronan stopped, struggling to find words for the fear that had driven every decision for the past 3 weeks. I couldn't fail you, any of you. I had to be strong. Being strong means knowing when to ask for help, Elena said quietly. Seraphine made a soft sound that might have been agreement. Ronan shot her a look, but she just raised an eyebrow. She's not wrong, Seraphine said, and for what it's worth, you can't do the ritual alone anyway. You'll need witnesses, people who knew your family, who can verify the truth of what the magic reveals. Ronan looked at Marcus, at Elena, at the pack members who'd followed them here. Will you help me? Of course we will, you idiot, Marcus said roughly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. The relief was almost overwhelming. Ronan felt something in his chest loosen. Not the curse, but the terrible isolation he'd wrapped around himself. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Elena said. If this ritual shows Kael cursed you, you'll have to face him. Are you ready for that? Ronan thought about his brother, about the hurt in Kael's eyes when Ronan had pushed him away, about years of resentment and rivalry and complicated brotherhood. No, he admitted, but I'll do it anyway. Because that was what being alpha meant, making the hard choices, doing the terrible necessary things, even if it broke him. Seraphine stepped forward, all business again. Then we need to prepare. The full moon rises tomorrow night. We'll perform the ritual here in the grove. But first, Ronan needs rest. Real rest, not whatever he's been doing. There's a safe house 2 miles west, Marcus said. We can take him there. Good. And someone needs to keep Kael occupied. We can't have him showing up before we're ready. I'll handle it, Elena volunteered. I'll tell him we're conducting a security review of the northern perimeter. That should keep him busy. They moved into action with the efficiency of people who'd worked together for years. Ronan let them take over, too exhausted to argue, and followed Marcus through the forest toward the safe house. As they walked, his beta fell into step beside him. For what it's worth, Marcus said quietly, I hope to hell it's not Kael. Me too. But if it is, Ronan didn't answer, because the truth was too brutal to say out loud. If it was Kael, he'd kill his own brother to survive. And the worst part was, he'd already made peace with that choice. The safe house appeared through the trees, and Ronan felt the last of his adrenaline desert him. He barely made it inside before his legs gave out. Marcus caught him, easing him down onto a cot. Easy. I've got you. I'm fine. You're really not. Marcus pulled off Ronan's boots with practiced efficiency. But you're going to be. We'll figure this out. Ronan wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this would all work out, that the curse would be broken, and the pack would survive, and everything he'd sacrificed would mean something. But as he drifted into fitful sleep, all he could see was Kael's face twisted with hatred, and blood on his hands that no amount of justification would ever wash clean. The dreams were worse than the waking. In them, Ronan stood in the memorial grove watching Kael's face twist with betrayal as the ritual fire revealed the truth. Except in the dreams, it wasn't just revelation. It was execution. Ronan's hands around his brother's throat, squeezing until the light went out of those gray eyes that looked so much like their father's, like his own. He woke gasping, tasting copper and ash. Marcus was there immediately, pressing a water skin into his hands. Easy. You're safe. What time is it? Few hours past dawn. You slept through the night. Marcus settled back onto the stool he'd dragged next to Ronan's cot. Seraphine says that's good. Means the potion's working. Ronan drank deeply, washing away the taste of blood. His body felt marginally better. The constant ache had dulled to something manageable, and his wolf wasn't actively trying to claw its way out. Small victories. Where is she? Outside, setting up for tonight. Elena's helping. Marcus hesitated. Kael sent a message this morning, asking where you were. Ronan's chest tightened. What did you tell him? That you were dealing with a security issue and would be back soon. He didn't believe me. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Ronan a text thread. He's been asking questions about your health, about why you've been acting strange. He's not stupid, Ronan. He knows something's wrong. The messages were innocuous enough on the surface, concern from a younger brother about his alpha's well-being. But reading between the lines, Ronan could see the probing, the attempts to gather information. Or maybe he was just paranoid. Maybe Kael was genuinely worried. Maybe the curse had nothing to do with his brother at all. We'll know tonight, Ronan said, handing back the phone. And if it is him... Ronan stood, testing his legs. They held. Then I do what needs to be done. Just like that? You'd kill your own brother? To save the pack? Yes. The words came out flat, emotionless. He'd practiced saying them so many times in his head that they'd lost all meaning. Just sounds strung together. Marcus looked at him like he was a stranger. I don't know if that makes you the strongest alpha I've ever known, or the most broken person. Probably both. He pushed past Marcus and stepped outside. The safe house sat in a small clearing, morning light filtering through the pines and dusty shafts. Seraphine had set up a working area near the tree line, a circle of stones, various containers of liquids and powders, and the materials they'd gathered arranged in specific patterns. Elena sat cross-legged nearby, watching Seraphine work with obvious fascination. She looked up when Ronan emerged. You look less like death, she said. Thanks. That's the goal. Seraphine didn't look up from her preparations. You need to eat. The ritual will drain you, and you're already running on empty. Marcus appeared with food. Dried meat, hard bread, cheese that had seen better days. Ronan forced himself to eat despite his stomach's protests. Every bite tasted like cardboard, but he knew Seraphine was right. He'd need every scrap of strength. Walk me through what happens tonight, he said around a mouthful of bread. Seraphine finally looked up, wiping her hands on a dark cloth. The identification ritual works through blood resonance. We'll create a circle with the materials we gathered, the ash, the water, the blood from the standing stone. You'll stand in the center and call the curse forward, make it reveal itself. And that will show me who cast it? Not directly, but the curse carries the signature of its creator, their essence, their intent. When you call it forward, anyone present who's bound to your bloodline will react, the caster most strongly. React how? Their power will answer. It's involuntary. They can't stop it any more than you can stop your heart from beating. She stood, brushing dirt from her layered garments. But here's the part you need to understand. The moment the curse reveals its caster, it will also fully activate. The slow drain you've been experiencing, that ends. It becomes aggressive, immediate. Ronan felt ice settle in his gut. How immediate? Minutes, maybe an hour, if you're lucky. Once the curse knows it's been identified, it stops being subtle. Seraphine's glowing eyes fixed on him. Which means you'll need to perform the breaking ritual right after the identification. No delays, no second chances. And the breaking ritual requires a life for a life. Yes. She said it clinically, like discussing a recipe. The caster's death will break the curse. Anyone else's death will just be murder. Elena made a small sound of distress. Marcus's jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. They all knew what this meant. If Kael was the caster, Ronan would have to kill him immediately. No time for goodbyes, no chance for explanations or mercy. Just execution. There's another option, Seraphine added, almost as an afterthought. Ronan's head snapped toward her. What option? The caster can break the curse themselves by willingly offering their own life. It's cleaner that way, more balanced. She shrugged. But it requires genuine willingness. Coercion or force taints the sacrifice. The curse would recognize it. So I can ask them to kill themselves. You can, whether they will or not. She left the sentence unfinished. Ronan thought about Kael, about the complicated mess of their relationship, love and resentment and rivalry all tangled together. Would his brother willingly die to save him, or would he fight, forcing Ronan to become a murderer? We need to bring Kael here, Ronan said, for the ritual. Marcus shook his head. He'll know something's up. You can't just summon him to a secret location and expect him not to ask questions. Then we tell him part of the truth, that I'm dying, that we're trying to break the curse, that we need him present because he's family. Ronan met his beta's eyes. He deserves that much, at least. And if he's the one who cursed you, you're giving him advance warning. I know, but I'm not ambushing my brother. If he did this... Ronan's voice caught, and he had to force the words out. If he did this, I want to look him in the eye when the truth comes out. I want him to know I gave him the chance to confess. Elena wiped at her eyes. This is going to destroy you. You know that? Either way, whether it's him or not, this is going to break something in you that never heals. I know. And you're doing it anyway. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice, Ronan. You just don't like the alternatives. She stood, brushing off her pants. I'll go get Kael. I'll tell him you're ready to explain everything. But I'm telling you right now, if this goes wrong, if you make the wrong call and kill an innocent man because some ritual said so, I'll never forgive you. The words hit like a slap. Elena had always been honest with him, sometimes brutally so, but this was different. This was a line being drawn. Noted, he said quietly. She left without another word, disappearing into the forest. Marcus watched her go, then turned back to Ronan. You sure about this? No, but we're doing it anyway. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Seraphine completed her ritual circle, checking and rechecking every detail with meticulous precision. Marcus split his time between standing guard and sending updates to the senior pack members still at the compound, carefully worded messages that explained nothing while promising everything would be resolved soon. Ronan tried to meditate, to center himself, to find some kind of peace before the nightmare began. It didn't work. His mind kept circling back to Kael, to memories of childhood before everything got complicated, racing through the forest together, the first time they'd both shifted successfully. Kael had been so proud, so happy, right up until their father had praised Ronan's form and barely acknowledged Kael's achievement. Training sessions that started friendly and ended with blood and bruises, and their father declaring Ronan the obvious winner. The night Ronan had been officially named Alpha Heir, and Kael had gotten drunk for the first time and told him he hated him, then cried and taken it back, then passed out while Ronan sat there wondering if the words you said drunk were the ones you meant most. Had that hatred festered, grown into something dark enough to murder? The sun was setting when Elena returned with Kael. Ronan's brother looked worried and suspicious in equal measure, his eyes scanning the clearing and landing on Seraphine with obvious distrust. What the hell is going on? Kael demanded. Elena said you were dying, but she wouldn't tell me anything else. And now there's a stranger doing some kind of ritual setup in the woods. I am dying, Ronan cut him off. Someone cursed me. I've got maybe 3 weeks left. Kael's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, disbelief, fear, and finally something that looked like genuine grief. What? How? When did this happen? Been going on for about a month. Got bad enough 3 weeks ago that I had to do something about it. And you didn't tell me? The hurt in Kael's voice was raw. I'm your brother, Ronan. How could you not? Because the curse was cast by someone in our bloodline. Ronan watched his brother's face carefully. Someone with access to blood magic and a reason to want me dead. Understanding dawned slowly. Ronan saw the exact moment Kael realized what he was being accused of. His brother took a step back, hand going to his chest like he'd been punched. You think I did this? I think we're going to find out who did it. Tonight. That's what the ritual's for. And then what? Kale's voice was shaking now with anger or fear or both. You execute whoever the magic fingers? Is that the plan? The curse has to be broken. That requires the caster's death. So yes, execution. Kale looked around at the assembled group. Marcus, Elena, Seraphine, the few other pack members who'd joined them. And you all agreed to this? To letting him murder someone based on some stranger's magic ritual? We agreed to save our alpha, Marcus said quietly, however that needs to happen. Even if it means killing an innocent person? The ritual doesn't lie, Seraphine spoke up for the first time. It can't. Magic has rules. Truth is one of them. Kale turned his attention to her, and Ronan saw his brother's expression shift into something calculating. And who exactly are you? What's your stake in all this? I'm the person who can break the curse. My stake is watching to see if Ronan can live with the choice he's about to make. Seraphine smiled, sharp and unsettling. Although I'm starting to think the answer is no. You're enjoying this, Kale said, disgust clear in his voice. I find human nature fascinating. Sue me. Kale. Ronan stepped between them, drawing his brother's attention back. I need you to participate in the ritual, as family. Please. Why? So you can kill me when it points at me? So I can know the truth. Ronan moved closer, keeping his voice low and steady. If you didn't do this, the ritual will prove it. You'll be cleared, and we can focus on finding who actually cast the curse. And if it does point at me, even though I didn't do anything, then we'll figure it out. But Kale... Ronan grabbed his brother's shoulders, forcing eye contact. I need to know, one way or another, please. Kale stared at him for a long moment. Then he jerked away, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so reminiscent of their father that Ronan's chest ached. Fine, I'll do your ritual, but when it shows I'm innocent, we're going to have a long conversation about trust and family and you being a paranoid asshole. Deal. The moon rose full and silver, turning the forest into a landscape of shadows and light. Seraphine had everyone arrange themselves around the ritual circle. Ronan at the center, Kyle to his right, Marcus and Elena flanking them, the other pack members forming an outer ring. The ash from the memorial grove had been mixed with the sunless water and blood from the standing stone, creating a dark paste that Seraphine used to paint symbols on the ground. They looked old, these symbols. Ancient. The kind of thing that shouldn't work but did anyway because the universe was stranger than anyone wanted to admit. Once we start, no one leaves the circle until it's finished, Seraphine instructed. Breaking the boundary could kill you. Understand? Nods all around. Ronan, you're going to call the curse forward. Speak directly to it. Demand it show itself and reveal its creator. Your wolf will resist. It's being turned against you. It won't want to cooperate. Push through that. Make it obey. Ronan nodded, his throat tight. Seraphine lit a small fire at the circle's edge, adding herbs that immediately produced thick, sweet-smelling smoke. Begin. Ronan closed his eyes, reaching inward to where his wolf lived. Usually it was an easy connection, smooth and natural as breathing. But now it felt like touching broken glass, painful and dangerous and wrong. Show yourself, he said aloud. I know you're there. I know you're killing me. Show me who created you. Nothing happened. You need to mean it, Seraphine said. Command it. You're an alpha. Act like one. Ronan opened his eyes, staring into the fire. He pulled on every ounce of dominance he possessed, channeling it into his voice. I said, show yourself. Now. This time something answered. The pain came first, vicious and immediate, like someone had shoved a hot knife between his ribs. Ronan gasped, nearly doubling over, but forced himself to stay upright. His wolf surged forward, not to shift but to fight, thrashing against his control with genuine violence. And then he felt it. The curse itself, like a living thing wrapped around his heart. Cold and hungry and patient, it had been draining him slowly for weeks. But now that he'd called it forward, it stopped pretending to be anything other than what it was. A death sentence. Kyle, he forced out through gritted teeth. Do you feel anything? His brother's face had gone pale, eyes wide. Yes, something's pulling at me, like hooks under my skin. Marcus shifted closer. I don't feel anything. Neither do I, Elena confirmed. Seraphine circled the ritual space, her glowing eyes tracking something invisible to everyone else. The curse is responding to Kael, his blood, his power, but... She stopped, frowning. That's strange. What? Ronan could barely get the word out. The pain was intensifying, the curse tightening its grip now that it had been exposed. It's responding to him but not originating from him, like he's connected to it, but he's not the source. Seraphine moved closer to Kael, studying him with intense focus. Have you ever worked with blood magic? No. I don't know anything about curses or... Kael cut himself off, his expression changing. Wait. There was... A few months ago, someone came to the compound, said they were a traveling healer. They asked for a blood sample from family members, said it was for medical research, documenting shifter bloodlines. Ronan's vision was starting to gray at the edges, but he focused on his brother. What did you give them? Just a vial, maybe 2 tablespoons. Kael's voice was rising with panic. I thought it was legitimate. They had credentials, references from other packs. What did they look like? It was months ago. I didn't... Kael stopped, his face going white. Oh no. Oh shit. What? They asked specifically about you. About your health. Your routines. Whether you had any ongoing medical issues. Kael's hands were shaking now. I thought they were just being thorough, but they were gathering information, planning how to curse you. And you gave them what they needed, Ronan said, the words coming out thick with pain and betrayal. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know they were going to... Kael reached for him, and Ronan jerked back. Ronan, please, I didn't mean for this to happen. I would never... The curse contracted violently, and Ronan screamed. It felt like his insides were being torn out through his chest, his wolf ripping itself apart in its attempt to escape. We're running out of time, Seraphine said urgently. The curse is activated. Ronan has maybe 15 minutes before it kills him. Then break it, Marcus shouted. I can't. The caster isn't here. Kyle's blood opened the door, but someone else walked through it. Ronan collapsed to his knees, blood pouring from his mouth. Through the haze of agony, he tried to think. Someone had used Kyle to get to him. Someone smart enough to manipulate his brother, patient enough to wait months for the curse to take hold, cruel enough to... Understanding hit like lightning. It wasn't a stranger, he gasped out. It was someone Kyle would trust. Someone who knew the pack well enough to know he handles supply logistics. Someone who would have access to our medical records. Who? Kyle demanded, dropping to his knees beside Ronan. Who would do this? Ronan looked up at the faces around the circle. Marcus, loyal for 12 years. Elena, who'd served his father before him. The senior pack members he'd known his entire life. Someone here was lying. Someone here had orchestrated this entire thing. And then he saw it. The smallest flicker of something in Marcus's expression. Not quite guilt, but close. Recognition, maybe. Or fear of being caught. Marcus? Ronan's voice was barely a whisper. His beta's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't... They said it wouldn't kill you, just weaken you enough that you'd have to step down. Let someone else lead. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment Ronan couldn't process it. Marcus, his beta, his best friend, the person he'd trusted more than anyone. Why? Because you're destroying the pack, Marcus's voice cracked. The exile of those kids, the constant dominance displays, the way you've been ruling through fear instead of respect. You've become exactly what your father was, a tyrant, and I couldn't watch you tear apart everything we built. Elena was backing away slowly, her hand over her mouth. The other pack members looked stunned, unable to reconcile what they were hearing with the Marcus they knew. So you cursed him to die? Kael's voice was shaking with rage. You used my blood to murder my brother? I told you it wasn't supposed to kill him. The healer said it would just make him sick enough to retire, to let the pack vote on new leadership. There's no such thing as a non-lethal blood curse, you idiot, Seraphine cut in. Whoever told you that was lying. Marcus's face went slack with horror. No, they promised. Who? Ronan forced himself to his feet, even though every movement was agony. Who promised? The healer. The one who came to collect blood samples. They said they were researching a cure for curse-based diseases, that they needed samples from established bloodlines. Marcus looked at Kale desperately. You met them too. You gave them blood. You know they seemed legitimate. I gave them blood because you vouched for them, Kale shouted. You said they checked out, that you'd verified their credentials. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture that made Ronan's stomach turn. Someone had played them both. Used Marcus's growing resentment and Kael's trusting nature to create the perfect curse. Blood from the Alpha's brother, cast by the Alpha's beta, impossible to trace back to its true origin. What did you trade for the curse? Seraphine asked Marcus. These things always require payment. Marcus looked sick. My position. They said when Ronan stepped down I'd be named his successor, that the pack would choose me as Alpha. And you believed them. Ronan's voice was flat, dead. The pain was still there, still tearing him apart, but it felt distant now, secondary to the absolute destruction of trust. You believed a stranger over 15 years of friendship. You weren't the Ronan I knew anymore. You'd changed, become cruel and paranoid, and you proved me right. Ronan spat blood. You proved every paranoid thought I had, every instinct that told me to trust no one, to keep everyone at arm's length, to lead through strength alone because caring about people just gave them weapons to use against you. Ronan, don't. Ronan held up a hand and Marcus fell silent. How do we break it? The curse. If you cast it, you can break it. Marcus's face went white. I don't know how. The healer? They never explained. The caster must offer their life willingly, Seraphine said. That's the only way. Marcus, if you want to fix this, you die. Right here, right now. The circle went silent, except for Ronan's labored breathing and the crackle of the ritual fire. Marcus looked at the knife on his belt, then at Ronan, then at Elena, who was crying openly now. I can't, he whispered. I don't want to die. But you wanted him to, Elena said, her voice thick with disgust. You were fine with Ronan dying slowly and painfully. You just didn't want to dirty your own hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But it is like this. Ronan felt his legs start to give out. Kale caught him, supporting his weight. And now you have a choice, Marcus. Die and break the curse, or refuse, and watch me die knowing it's your fault. Marcus's hand went to his knife, fingers trembling on the hilt. For a long moment, Ronan thought he might actually do it, might find the courage to make the sacrifice. Then Marcus's hand fell away. I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. Then I'll do it for you, Ronan said, and reached for his own knife. But his body betrayed him. The curse had drained too much. The pain was too intense. His hand barely made it to his belt before his knees buckled completely. Kale lowered him to the ground, cradling his head. No, you're not dying like this, not because of him. The curse will kill him in minutes if we don't act, Seraphine said. Someone has to kill Marcus. Now. Elena moved first. She pulled her knife and advanced on Marcus with murder in her eyes. You coward! You absolute coward! Marcus backed up, hands raised. Elena, wait, please. You don't get to beg. She was crying, but her hands were steady. You don't get mercy after what you've done. Stop, Ronan managed to gasp out. Elena, stop! She froze, looking back at him. Why? He deserves this. Because, Ronan coughed, blood spraying across the ground. Because I won't let him turn you into a murderer. Not for this. Then what? We just let you die? Through the haze of pain, Ronan heard Seraphine's earlier words echo in his mind. The caster can break the curse themselves by willingly offering their own life. But there's another way. If someone bound to the same bloodline offers themselves instead, the magic will accept it as fair exchange. He looked up at Kael, who was still holding him, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Ronan whispered. For what? For everything. For suspecting you. For being a terrible brother. For... Shut up, Kael said fiercely. You're not dying. I won't let you. Ronan tried to smile, failed. Not your choice. But even as he said it, Kael's expression changed. Understanding dawned, followed by determination. No, Ronan said, realizing what his brother was thinking. Kael, No, I'm bound to your bloodline, Kael said, looking at Seraphine. If I offer my life willingly, would it break the curse? Don't answer that, Ronan tried to order, but his voice had no strength left. Seraphine studied Kael for a moment, then nodded. Yes, the magic would recognize it as proper payment. A life for a life, both from the same blood. Then that's what we do. Kael pulled out his knife. Kael, stop! Ronan tried to grab his brother's arm, but he couldn't make his muscles obey. You don't have to. This isn't your fault. You're my brother, Kael said simply. You're a terrible alpha sometimes, and you push everyone away and you make stupid decisions. But you're still my brother, and the pack needs you more than it needs me. That's not true. It is true. You know it is. Kael looked around the circle, meeting each person's eyes. You all know it. The pack falls apart without Ronan, but without me, you'll barely notice I'm gone. That's not, Elena started, but Kael cut her off. It's okay. I've made peace with it. He looked down at Ronan, and there was something like relief in his expression. I've spent my whole life being the spare, the backup plan, the one who wasn't quite good enough. Maybe this is how I finally measure up. By dying for me? Ronan could barely see through his tears. That's not measuring up, that's suicide. No, it's choice. Kael pressed the knife into Ronan's hand, closing his fingers around it. And for once in my life, I'm choosing to be the hero instead of the footnote. I won't do it. I won't kill you. Then the curse kills you instead. And Marcus gets away with it, and everything you built falls apart. Kael's voice was steady, certain. Is that really how you want this to end? Ronan looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw all the years of resentment had been shed, stripped away to reveal something simpler underneath: love, sacrifice, the kind of bravery that had nothing to do with dominance or strength. I'm sorry, Ronan whispered again. I know, me too. Kael smiled, and it was genuine. Tell the pack I went out like an alpha, even if I never got to be one. Then he grabbed Ronan's hand, the one holding the knife, and drove it into his own chest. The world stopped. Ronan felt the blade sink into Kael's chest, felt the resistance of skin and muscle and bone, felt the wet warmth of blood flowing over his hand. His brother's eyes went wide, more surprise than pain, and Ronan tried to pull back, but Kael's grip on his wrist was iron. Let it finish, Kael gasped. Don't let me die for nothing. Then he collapsed, taking Ronan down with him. They hit the ground together, Ronan's hand still wrapped around the knife buried in his brother's chest. The ritual fire flared bright white, so intense that everyone had to shield their eyes. Ronan felt the curse break. It was immediate and violent. The dark presence that had been wrapped around his heart for weeks simply shattered, dissolving into nothing. His wolf surged forward, no longer fighting him but flowing smooth and natural, like coming home after years of exile. The pain vanished. The copper taste disappeared. Even the exhaustion that had been dragging him down lifted, replaced by a rush of strength so overwhelming he gasped. But none of it mattered because Kael was dying in his arms. No! Ronan pulled the knife out with shaking hands, pressing down on the wound to stop the bleeding. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to die. Kael coughed, blood on his lips. Too late for that. Seraphine. Ronan looked up desperately. Fix this. Heal him. You can break curses. You can heal a stab wound. The magic required a life, Seraphine said, her voice infuriatingly calm. That life was given. I can't undo the price. Then I'll give my life instead. Take it. Take whatever you need. Doesn't work that way. Kael's hand found Ronan's, squeezed weakly. Stop trying to fix everything. Just be here. With me. Ronan looked down at his brother, at the blood spreading across his chest in a dark stain, and felt something in him crack wide open. All the years of rivalry and resentment, all the competition their father had fostered, all the distance Ronan had maintained because being alpha meant staying separate. None of it mattered now. All that mattered was that Kael was dying and Ronan couldn't stop it. I'm sorry, he said, the words inadequate and too late. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not being a better brother, for suspecting you, for... Stop apologizing and listen. Kael's breathing was shallow, labored. The pack. You need to lead differently. Not like Dad. Not through fear. Be better. I don't know how. Figure it out. Kale smiled, blood staining his teeth. You're the smart one, remember? The chosen one. Live up to it. Elena was crying openly now, her sobs harsh in the silence. The other pack members had their heads bowed. Whether in grief or respect or shame, Ronan couldn't tell. Marcus stood frozen at the edge of the circle, his face a mask of horror. Kale, please. Ronan's voice broke. Tell Mom and Dad. Kale coughed. More blood. Tell them I finally did something worth remembering. They'd be proud of you. I'm proud of you. Liar. But Kael's smile widened fractionally. Love you anyway. His hand went slack in Ronan's grip. His eyes stayed open, fixed on the moon overhead, but the light in them was gone. Ronan sat there holding his brother's body, feeling the warmth slowly fade from Kael's skin, and something howled inside him that had nothing to do with his wolf. It was pure grief, raw and devastating, the sound of every regret and missed opportunity and conversation they'd never have. He didn't know how long he sat there. Time felt broken, meaningless. Eventually, Elena's hand on his shoulder pulled him back. Ronan, we have to move. Deal with Marcus, figure out who the real puppet master is. Ronan looked up at her, then past her to where Marcus still stood. His beta, his former beta, looked like he might be sick. I didn't know, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. I swear I didn't know it would kill him. Either of you. You thought wrong. Ronan laid Kael's body down gently, closing his brother's eyes. When he stood, he swayed slightly, but his voice was steady. You betrayed me. Betrayed the pack. Used my brother's blood to murder me, and when it came time to fix your mistake, you were too much of a coward to pay the price. I know, and be quiet. The command was absolute, backed by the full force of Ronan's alpha dominance. Marcus's mouth snapped shut, his body going rigid. You don't get to speak. You don't get to defend yourself. You certainly don't get to apologize. Ronan walked toward him, and Marcus tried to back up but found himself frozen in place by the sheer weight of Ronan's will. The pack bond thrummed between them, and Ronan could feel it straining, threatening to snap. Here's what's going to happen, Ronan said quietly. You're going to tell me everything you know about the person who gave you the curse. Their name, their appearance, where they came from, what they promised you, every detail. Marcus nodded jerkily. The healer, they called themselves Dr. Voss, showed credentials from the Medicinal Council, letters of recommendation from 3 other packs. They looked legitimate. What did they look like? Middle-aged, maybe 45. Average height, brown hair going gray, glasses. They had this birthmark on their left hand shaped like a crescent moon. Marcus was talking fast now, words tumbling over each other. They stayed at the compound for 3 days, interviewed several pack members about medical history, took blood samples. I verified their credentials. I checked everything. And the credentials were fake, Seraphine interjected. Someone went to a lot of trouble to create a believable cover identity. Who would do that? Elena asked. Who has that kind of resources and the knowledge to create blood curses? Seraphine circled Marcus slowly, studying him like a specimen. Someone who wanted Ronan dead or weakened badly enough to orchestrate an elaborate deception. Someone who knew the pack's internal dynamics well enough to identify Marcus as a potential weak point. She stopped, looking at Ronan. Someone who's been planning this for a long time. Ronan's mind raced through the possibilities. Other alphas who might benefit from his death? Rival packs who wanted his territory? Someone from his past seeking revenge? The Crane Pack, he said suddenly. The border disputes. We settled them 5 years ago, but it was brutal. A lot of their people died. Vincent Crane swore vengeance, Marcus confirmed. Said you'd pay for what you did to his family. But Vincent's dead, Elena pointed out. Died 2 years ago from natural causes. His son isn't. Ronan felt pieces clicking together. David Crane. He would have been in his early 20s during the border wars, lost his father to the settlement terms. The stress of losing territory killed Vincent faster than any disease. Seraphine nodded slowly. Revenge is a powerful motivator, powerful enough to spend years planning, to learn blood magic, to infiltrate your pack with a fake identity. We need to verify this, Ronan said. Send scouts to Crane territory. See if David's been acting strange. Check if anyone matching Dr. Voss's description has connections to their pack. I'll handle it. Elena pulled out her phone, already typing messages to pack members back at the compound. We'll have answers by morning. Ronan turned back to Marcus. You're exiled, effective immediately. I'm severing your pack bond. Marcus's face went white. Ronan, please. I said be quiet. Ronan reached for the bond connecting them, that thread of pack magic that had linked them for 12 years. It felt wrong to break it, like tearing out a piece of himself. But it had to be done. You made your choice. Now live with it. He pulled, hard and clean, and the bond snapped. Marcus screamed, doubling over as the severance tore through him. It wasn't physically painful, not exactly, but losing pack connection was a deep, visceral loss that most shifters described as having their soul ripped in half. Ronan felt it too, felt the absence where Marcus had been, but he pushed through it. When it was done, Marcus was on his knees, gasping. You have until sunrise to get off Packlands, Ronan said. If you're still here when the sun comes up, I'll hunt you down myself, understand? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Get him out of my sight. 2 pack members moved forward, hauling Marcus to his feet and dragging him toward the forest. He didn't resist, didn't look back, just stumbled away into the darkness like a ghost. When he was gone, the ritual circle felt emptier, colder. Ronan looked down at Kyle body and felt the grief threaten to swallow him whole. We need to take him home, he said quietly. Prepare him properly. He deserves that much. We will. Elena's voice was gentle. But Ronan, you need to address the pack. When word of this gets out, Marcus's betrayal, Kyle's sacrifice, they're going to be terrified, confused. You need to get ahead of it. She was right. Ronan could already imagine the chaos this would cause. Their beta revealed as a traitor, the alpha's brother dead, rumors of curses and blood magic. It would tear the pack apart if he didn't handle it carefully. Call a gathering for dawn, he said. Everyone attends, no exceptions. What are you going to tell them? The truth. Ronan looked at the faces around him, loyal pack members who'd witnessed everything, who'd seen him at his weakest and most vulnerable. All of it. They deserve to know what happened, what we're facing. Seraphine made a small sound that might have been approval. Interesting choice. Most alphas would bury this, control the narrative. I'm not most alphas. No, you're not. She moved to Kale's body, kneeling beside it with surprising reverence. He was brave, foolish maybe, but brave. The pack will remember him well. They'd better. Ronan's voice came out harder than intended. He saved all of them. The least they can do is honor that. They wrapped Kyle in a blanket someone produced, carrying him back through the forest toward the compound. The journey took hours, moving slowly and carefully through the darkness. Ronan walked ahead, setting the pace, his mind churning through everything that had happened. Marcus's betrayal hurt worse than the curse ever had. 12 years of friendship, of trust, of fighting side by side. All of it a lie. Or not a lie exactly, but something that had curdled over time into resentment and justified treachery. Had Ronan really become that bad? So tyrannical that his own beta thought murder was the only solution? Elena fell into step beside him. Stop! Stop what? Blaming yourself. I can see you doing it. Ronan didn't answer. Marcus made his choice, Elena continued. He could have talked to you, confronted you, challenged you openly if he thought you were becoming a tyrant. Instead, he went behind your back and tried to kill you. That's on him, not you. But he wasn't completely wrong, was he? Ronan's voice was quiet. I have been harder lately, less forgiving. Those kids I exiled for stealing food were stealing during a crisis. You made a tough call, a wrong call. If I'd investigated deeper, I would have found out about the supply problems, would have realized someone was sabotaging our stores. He paused. Probably Marcus. Elena was quiet for a moment. Yeah, probably Marcus. They walked in silence after that, the weight of revelation settling over them both. By the time they reached the compound, the sky was starting to lighten, dawn painting the eastern horizon in shades of gray and pink. The pack was already assembling in the main hall, roused by the messages Elena had sent ahead. Ronan could hear the murmur of worried voices, the undercurrent of fear and confusion. He stopped at the entrance, looking at the blanket-wrapped form they'd carried home. Kyle deserved a proper ceremony, songs and stories, and the kind of farewell their people gave to heroes. But first, Ronan had to face the pack, had to explain how their beta had betrayed them, and their alpha's brother had died saving them all. "You ready?" Elena asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." She pushed open the doors. "Let's do this anyway." The hall went silent as Ronan entered, all eyes tracking his movement. He could feel their fear, their uncertainty, traveling through the pack bonds that connected them all. Without Marcus as his beta, those bonds felt looser, more fragile, like a web with broken strands. He'd need to name a new beta soon, but not today. Today was for truth and grief and figuring out how to move forward. Ronan walked to the front of the hall, to the alpha's seat he'd occupied for 15 years. But he didn't sit. Instead, he stood before his pack, met their eyes, and began. Marcus is gone, exiled for betrayal and attempted murder. The words fell like stones, and he heard gasps, shocked murmurs. He conspired with an outsider to curse me, using blood magic and Kael's unwitting cooperation. The curse was designed to kill me slowly, to weaken me until I had to step down. The murmurs grew louder. Ronan raised his hand for silence and got it. My brother Kael discovered the plot's true nature. When the curse was identified and activated, when it became clear someone had to die to break it, Kael chose to sacrifice himself. He gave his life willingly to save mine and protect the pack. He gestured, and the pack members carrying Kael's body came forward, laying the blanket-wrapped form on the floor in front of Ronan. Several people in the crowd started crying. "I know you're scared, confused, angry. You have every right to be. Your beta betrayed you. Your alpha's brother is dead, and we still don't know who the real enemy is, the person who created this entire situation." "Then what do we do?" someone called from the crowd. An older pack member, one who'd served under Ronan's father. "We investigate. We find whoever orchestrated this and we make them answer for it." Ronan's voice hardened. "But more importantly, we change. We become stronger. Not through fear and dominance, but through trust and unity. Through being the kind of pack worth dying for." He looked down at Kael's body. "My brother's last words to me were a command to lead differently, to be better than our father, better than I've been." He raised his eyes back to the assembly. "I'm going to honor that, starting now." "How?" Elena asked from her position near the front. The question wasn't challenging. She was giving him a platform, helping guide the conversation. "By telling you the truth even when it makes me look weak. By asking for your counsel instead of just issuing orders. By remembering that being alpha doesn't mean being separate from the pack. It means being responsible for it." Ronan took a breath. "I've made mistakes. Been too harsh, too quick to punish, too slow to listen. Some of you paid the price for that." He looked directly at Jonas Kerr's mother, the woman who'd challenged him during the tribunal. "The 3 boys I exiled for stealing food, bring them back. The exile is rescinded. We'll address the supply problems properly, find out who's been sabotaging our stores, and make sure no one goes hungry again." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. "Anyone who has grievances, concerns, ideas, I want to hear them. Not just from senior pack members. From everyone." Ronan's gaze swept the room. "We're going to rebuild this pack, make it stronger, safer, better. But I can't do it alone. I need all of you." The silence that followed felt different from before, less fearful, more contemplative. He could see pack members exchanging glances, processing this new version of their alpha. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in. It grew into a wave of applause that filled the hall, and Ronan felt something in his chest loosen. Not forgiveness, he didn't deserve that yet, but maybe the beginning of hope. When the applause died down, Elena stepped forward. "We need to address the immediate threat. Whoever created this curse is still out there. They failed to kill Ronan, but that doesn't mean they won't try again." "We've sent scouts to Crane territory," Ronan confirmed. "If David Crane is behind this, we'll have confirmation within 24 hours. In the meantime, we increase patrols, tighten security, and no one, and I mean no one, gives blood samples to strangers, no matter how legitimate they seem." "What about visitors to the compound?" someone asked. "Screen thoroughly. Background checks, references verified personally, and they're escorted at all times. We don't take chances anymore. Seraphine, who'd been standing quietly at the back of the hall, finally spoke up. You should also establish magical wards, basic protection spells, nothing elaborate, but enough to alert you if someone tries curse work on pack lands again. The pack members looked at her with obvious distrust. An outsider, a witch, someone who dealt in the kind of magic most shifters avoided, but Ronan nodded. Can you teach us? Seraphine raised an eyebrow. You want me to stay? I want us to be protected. If that means learning from you, then yes. Will you teach us? She studied him for a long moment, those glowing eyes searching for something. Finally, she smiled. All right, but I'm not doing it for free. Name your price. A place to stay, protection, and access to your pack's historical records. I'm researching bloodline magic, and you have one of the oldest lineages in the Northern Territories. It was a reasonable request, almost suspiciously so. Ronan glanced at Elena, who shrugged. Your call. Done. You can stay as long as you need, but if you betray us, you'll hunt me down and rip my throat out. Yes, I got that part? Seraphine's smile widened. Don't worry, Alpha. I have no interest in betrayal. I find honest work much more rewarding. With that settled, Ronan turned his attention back to the pack. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Rebuilding trust, strengthening defenses, finding our real enemy. But we'll do it together, as a pack, the way it should have been all along. He knelt beside Kale's body, placing a hand on his brother's chest. Tonight, we'll hold a proper ceremony, honor my brother the way he deserves. But for now, I need volunteers to prepare the memorial grove, and I need someone to bring back the exiled members, Jonas, David, and Tyler. Tell them they're pardoned and welcomed home. Hands went up immediately. People volunteering, stepping forward to help, engaging with their alpha in a way that had been absent for too long. This was what Kyle had meant. This connection, this unity. It wasn't weakness. It was the foundation of real strength. The meeting broke up into smaller groups, pack members organizing tasks and supporting each other. Ronan stayed where he was, kneeling beside his brother, until Elena came to stand next to him. You did good, she said quietly. I got my brother killed. No, Marcus got your brother killed. Kyle chose to sacrifice himself. You honored that choice by living and changing. She squeezed his shoulder. Don't waste his death by drowning in guilt. Ronan looked up at her. I need a new beta. I know. I want it to be you. Elena's eyes widened. Ronan, you've never been afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. You challenged me during the tribunal, stood up for what you believed even when it cost you. That's what I need. Someone who'll keep me honest. I don't know if I'm qualified. Neither was I when I became Alpha. We'll figure it out together. He stood, facing her fully. Will you do it? Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yeah, I'll do it. But Ronan, if you start sliding back into tyrant mode, I'm going to kick your ass, publicly. I'm counting on it. They clasped forearms, and Ronan felt the pack bond shift, restructuring itself around Elena as his new beta. It felt different from the connection he'd had with Marcus, lighter somehow, less burdened by history and resentment. It felt right. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. The memorial grove was prepared, wood gathered for the ceremonial fire. Scouts reported back with preliminary findings. David Crane had been seen meeting with unknown individuals in neutral territory, and there were rumors he'd been studying unusual subjects, including historical accounts of blood magic. It wasn't proof yet, but it was enough to confirm Ronan's suspicions. As evening approached, the pack gathered at the grove. They dressed in ceremonial clothing, dark colors, simple designs, the kind of formal wear reserved for important pack events. Ronan wore his father's jacket, the leather worn soft with age, carrying the scent of smoke and pine and memory. Kyle's body had been prepared according to tradition, wrapped in white cloth embroidered with the pack's symbols. They laid him on the pyre as the sun set, the sky burning orange and red. Ronan stepped forward to speak, but found his voice caught in his throat. He looked at the faces around him, pack members he'd known his whole life, people who'd watched him and Kyle grow up, and saw his own grief reflected back. Elena touched his elbow gently. I can do it if you want. No, I need to. Ronan cleared his throat, forcing the words out. Kale Blackwood was my brother, my rival, my friend. He spent his life in my shadow, always second best, always the spare heir. And he never complained, never stopped trying to earn our father's approval, my respect, the pack's recognition. He paused, gathering himself. Tonight, he earned all of that and more. He gave his life to save mine, to save all of you, to protect the pack he loved even when it didn't love him back the way he deserved. He died a hero, and we will remember him as one. Ronan lit the torch, the flames catching immediately. Kael asked me to tell our parents he finally did something worth remembering. But the truth is, he was always worth remembering. We were just too blind to see it. He touched the torch to the pyre, and the flames spread quickly, consuming the wood and white-wrapped body. The pack began to sing, the old songs, the ones passed down through generations, about sacrifice and honor, and the warriors who gave everything to protect their people. Ronan sang too, his voice rough but steady, and watched his brother burn. The ceremony lasted hours. They sang until the pyre burned down to embers, until the moon rose high and silver, until their voices were hoarse and their eyes dry from crying. When it was finally over, when the last song faded into silence, the pack dispersed slowly, heading back to the compound in small groups. Ronan stayed. He gathered Kael's ashes with bare hands, just as he'd gathered their parents' ashes weeks before, and placed them in a carved wooden urn. Tomorrow he'd scatter them in the memorial grove, add his brother's memory to the long line of pack members who'd died protecting what mattered. But tonight, he just needed to sit with the grief. Elena found him there as the night deepened, 2 cups of something that smelled like spiced cider in her hands. She sat down next to him without asking, offering 1 cup. Seraphine says David Crane definitely has the knowledge to create that curse, she said after a while. She found references in your pack's historical records. His great-grandmother was a blood witch who married into the Crane line 3 generations back. So it's genetic. Apparently, rare, but it runs in families. Elena sipped her cider. We'll need to confront him eventually, get answers, make sure he can't try this again. I know. Ronan stared at the dying embers. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want to remember my brother. Fair enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last of the fire burn down to nothing. Somewhere in the forest, wolves were singing, pack members on patrol, their voices carrying through the trees. It sounded different now, less like a warning and more like a promise. The pack would survive. They'd face whatever came next together, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. And Ronan would lead them, not as a tyrant, but as an alpha who'd learned the hard way that real strength came from connection, not isolation. It was what Kael had died for. The least Ronan could do was make it count. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. 3 days after Kael's funeral, Elena walked into Ronan's office with confirmation they'd all been dreading. David Crane, she said, dropping a folder on his desk. Our scouts tracked him to a cabin 15 miles into neutral territory. He's been there for 2 weeks, and according to the locals, he's been asking questions about curse-breaking rituals and how to detect if blood magic has failed. Ronan looked up from the supply reports he'd been reviewing, actual supply reports this time, not the doctored versions Marcus had been feeding him for months. So he knows it didn't work. Knows, and is probably planning his next move. Elena sat down across from him, looking as tired as he felt. We need to deal with this, Ronan. Now, before he tries again. I know. Ronan closed the folder, rubbing his eyes. But we can't just march into neutral territory and execute him. That breaks about a dozen pack laws and would give the other alphas justification to move against us. So what do you suggest? We bring him here, to pack lands. Make him answer for what he did in front of witnesses. Ronan leaned back in his chair. I want him to confess. I want everyone to hear it. Our pack, the neighboring alphas, anyone who might question whether this was justified. Elena considered this. He won't come willingly. Then we make him an offer he can't refuse. Ronan pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. Send this message to David Crane. Tell him we know what he did, we have proof, and we're willing to negotiate terms before involving the council. That's a bluff? We don't have definitive proof. He doesn't know that, and if he's smart, he'll realize that negotiating is better than having the council investigate. They don't look kindly on blood curses, especially ones that target alphas. Elena took the note, reading it over. What if he runs instead? Then we hunt him, but I don't think he will. He went to too much trouble orchestrating this to just abandon it now. Ronan met her eyes. He wants me dead, Elena. That kind of hatred doesn't disappear. It festers, and eventually it makes people stupid. She nodded slowly. I'll send it. But Ronan, when he gets here, what's the plan? Because we can't just kill him either, not without a trial. We'll give him a trial, a proper one, with evidence and witnesses and a chance to defend himself. Ronan's voice hardened. And when he's found guilty, we'll give him the same choice Marcus got, exile or execution. Let him pick. The message went out that afternoon. 2 days later, David Crane arrived at the compound's gates, flanked by 2 pack members who'd escorted him from neutral territory. He came peacefully, which told Ronan everything he needed to know about the man's arrogance. David Crane was in his late 20s, tall and lean, with the kind of good looks that probably made people underestimate him. He had his father's sharp features and his grandmother's dark eyes. The Blood Witch's eyes, Ronan realized, seeing them up close for the first time. Alpha Blackwood, David said, his tone carefully neutral. I received your message, quite the serious accusations. Quite the serious crime, Ronan replied. He'd insisted on meeting David at the gates personally, with Elena and a dozen pack members as witnesses. No private conversations, no backroom deals. Everything out in the open. You used blood magic to curse me. You manipulated my beta into being your instrument, and you're responsible for my brother's death. David's expression didn't change. I assume you have proof of these claims. We have Marcus's testimony. We have the ritual materials used in the curse. We have scouts who witnessed you meeting with known practitioners of blood magic. Ronan took a step closer. And we have Seraphine Vale, who identified the curse's signature as belonging to someone from the Crane bloodline with access to inherited power. That got a reaction, a flicker of surprise in those dark eyes. Seraphine Vale is here? She is. And she's very interested in speaking with you about your technique. Apparently the curse you created was quite sophisticated, almost professional. David recovered quickly, his face smoothing back into careful neutrality. I'm flattered by the attention, but I'm afraid you've made a mistake. I don't practice blood magic. I'm a researcher, yes, but purely academic. Cut the shit, Elena interrupted. We know it was you. The question is whether you're going to confess and face judgment like an adult, or whether we're going to drag this out until the council gets involved and makes it even worse for you. David looked at her, then back at Ronan. Something shifted in his expression, calculation giving way to cold satisfaction. You want a confession? Fine. Yes, I cursed you. I spent 3 years researching, planning, creating the perfect weapon to destroy you slowly and completely. I wanted you to suffer the way my father suffered, the way my family suffered when you forced us to surrender territory we'd held for generations. The admission hung in the air like a blade. The pack members who'd been listening murmured among themselves, but Ronan held up a hand for silence. Your father agreed to those terms, he said quietly. The border disputes were resolved through negotiation, witnessed by the council. No one forced him to do anything. You starved us! David's composure cracked, rage bleeding through. You cut off our trade routes, blockaded our access to winter hunting grounds, and then offered generous terms that amounted to surrender. My father died from the stress of it, from watching everything he built crumble because you wanted to expand your territory. I wanted to protect my pack. Your father kept pushing into our lands, stealing resources, attacking our patrols. I gave him multiple chances to negotiate before I acted. You gave him ultimatums, threats. You're no different than any other tyrant. You just hide behind the illusion of civilization while you crush anyone who challenges you. The words echoed Ronan's own fears, the accusations Marcus had leveled before his exile. For a moment, he wondered if David was right. If all his talk about protecting the pack was just justification for the same brutal dominance his father had practiced. Then he looked at the pack members assembled around him, people he'd sworn to protect, who'd chosen to follow him even after seeing him at his weakest. People who'd started speaking up in meetings, offering ideas, challenging his decisions in constructive ways because he'd finally given them permission to do so. This was different. He was different. I was wrong about a lot of things, Ronan said. Too harsh, too quick to use force, but I never used blood magic to murder someone. I never manipulated innocent people into being weapons. His voice caught. I never made someone kill their own brother. David's smile was vicious. No, you just forced your brother to sacrifice himself. Very noble. I'm sure that absolves you of all guilt. Ronan felt his wolf surge forward, violent and protective, wanting nothing more than to tear this man apart for speaking about Kael with such contempt. But he forced it down, channeling all that rage into cold control. You'll stand trial, he said. Tomorrow, at dawn, in front of the assembled pack and representatives from the neighboring territories. You'll answer for what you've done, and justice will be served according to pack law. And if I refuse, then we hand you over to the council tonight and you face their justice instead, which I promise you will be far less merciful than ours. Ronan gestured to the pack members flanking David. Take him to the holding cells. Make sure he's comfortable. We want him in good condition for tomorrow. David went without resistance, though the look he shot Ronan over his shoulder was pure poison. When he was gone, Elena let out a breath. That went better than expected. He confessed in front of witnesses. That's all we needed. Ronan turned to the pack members who'd observed the exchange. Spread the word. Tell everyone what he admitted to. I want the whole pack to know exactly what happened and why. They dispersed quickly, already buzzing with the news. Ronan watched them go, feeling the weight of what was coming. A trial meant judgment, and judgment meant execution. There was no other outcome for someone who'd committed blood magic murder. The council's laws were explicit on that point, but it also meant closure. An end to the threat, a chance for the pack to see justice served and move forward. Elena touched his arm. You okay? I will be, once this is over. The trial convened at dawn, as promised. The Great Hall was packed beyond capacity. Not just Blackwood pack members, but representatives from the Crane Pack, the neighboring territories, and even a council observer who'd arrived overnight after hearing about the accusations. Ronan had spent the night preparing, going over every detail with Elena and Seraphine. They had Marcus's written testimony, delivered under oath. They had the ritual materials, analyzed and confirmed as blood magic components. They had witness statements from pack members who'd seen Dr. Voss, David Crane's fake identity, at the compound. It was airtight, but Ronan still felt nervous. David was brought in under guard, looking remarkably composed for someone facing execution. He'd cleaned up, changed into fresh clothes, and wore an expression of almost serene confidence. That confidence worried Ronan more than rage would have. The council observer, a severe woman named Margaret, with steel gray hair and eyes like a hawk, took her seat at a table positioned perpendicular to Ronan's alpha chair. She would oversee the proceedings, ensure pack law was followed, and carry the official report back to the council. We're here to determine the guilt or innocence of David Crane in the matter of blood curse murder against Alpha Ronan Blackwood, Margaret announced, her voice carrying through the packed hall. The accused has already confessed to the crime, but pack law requires a formal trial with presentation of evidence. Alpha Blackwood, you may begin. Ronan stood, addressing not just Margaret but the entire assembly. 3 weeks ago, I began experiencing symptoms of a blood curse. The curse was designed to kill me slowly, turning my own wolf against me while draining my strength. The curse caster used my brother's blood, obtained through deception, and manipulated my beta into serving as an unwitting instrument. He gestured to Elena, who stepped forward with the evidence they'd compiled. Ritual components, written testimonies, Seraphine's magical analysis. She laid it all out methodically, building the case piece by piece. The curse required a sacrifice to break, Ronan continued. My brother, Kael Blackwood, gave his life willingly to save mine and protect the pack. He died because David Crane wanted revenge for his father's death during the border disputes 5 years ago. The border disputes that you initiated, David interrupted from his position between the guards. Margaret shot him a sharp look. You'll have your chance to speak. Be silent until then. David smiled, but obeyed. Ronan continued laying out the evidence, each piece damning. The fake credentials David had created for his Dr. Voss persona, the timeline of the curse's development, the confession David himself had given at the gates. When he finished, Margaret reviewed the materials with clinical precision. Then she looked at David. The evidence is substantial. Do you dispute any of it? No, David said calmly. I did exactly what I'm accused of. I cursed Ronan Blackwood with the intent to kill him, using knowledge passed down through my family line from my great-grandmother, who was a blood witch before she married into the Crane Pack. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Crane Pack representative, David's cousin, Ronan realized, looked stricken. You admit to practicing blood magic? Margaret's tone was ice. I do. I also admit to manipulating Marcus into serving as my instrument and to creating a false identity to infiltrate the Blackwood pack. David's smile widened. I'm guilty of everything Ronan has accused me of, and more. The only thing I regret is that the curse failed. The hall erupted in angry shouts. Ronan raised his hand for silence and eventually got it, though the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Then, under pack law and council authority, I find you guilty, Margaret said. The penalty for blood curse murder is death. However, as the victim, Alpha Blackwood has the right to show mercy. Do you wish to offer an alternative sentence? This was the moment Ronan had been dreading. By law, he could exile David instead of executing him. Send him away stripped of pack bonds, cast out into the world with nothing. But exile hadn't stopped Marcus from potentially spreading more poison. And it wouldn't stop David, who had proven himself patient, resourceful, and utterly committed to revenge. Ronan looked at Kyle urn, which he'd placed at the front of the hall as a reminder of what this trial was really about. His brother had died to break the curse. The least Ronan could do was make sure it stayed broken. No mercy, he said quietly. The sentence is death, to be carried out immediately. David's smile never wavered. How very alpha of you. Tell me, Ronan, do you think killing me makes you better than your father, or does it just prove you're exactly the same? The words were designed to hurt, to make Ronan second-guess himself, and they almost worked. For a moment he wavered, wondering if executing David was justice or just another exercise in brutal dominance. Then Elena spoke up from beside him. My alpha asked a question that deserves an answer. Why confess so readily? You could have fought this, demanded more evidence, drawn it out. Instead, you admitted everything. Why? David's smile finally faltered. Just for a second, but Ronan caught it. Because he wanted to be martyred, Seraphine said, stepping forward from where she'd been observing near the back. He wanted Ronan to execute him, to look like a tyrant in front of the council observer and the other packs. Make them question Ronan's leadership, destabilize the Blackwood pack from beyond the grave. Understanding dawned like cold water. David hadn't given up. He'd just changed tactics. If he couldn't kill Ronan with magic, he'd try to destroy him politically instead. That won't work, Margaret said dryly. The council doesn't consider lawful execution of a blood-cursed murderer to be tyranny. It's justice. And Alpha Blackwood has conducted this trial by the book, with full transparency and proper evidence. There's nothing here that undermines his authority. David's expression finally cracked, rage bleeding through the calm facade. You don't understand. He destroyed my family, took everything from us. He deserves to suffer. Your father made choices that led to his own downfall, Ronan interrupted. Bad choices. Aggressive choices that threatened my pack. I responded in kind. That's not tyranny. It's leadership. You killed him. The stress of losing territory killed him. I never laid a hand on your father. Ronan moved closer, until he was standing directly in front of David. And even if I had, that wouldn't justify blood curse murder. It wouldn't justify manipulating innocent people. It wouldn't justify killing my brother. He could see the moment David realized he'd lost. Not just the trial, but the narrative. No one in this hall saw him as a tragic victim seeking justice. They saw him as a murderer who'd tried to be clever and failed. Any last words? Ronan asked quietly. David spat at his feet. I hope you choke on this victory. I hope it poisons everything you touch. Noted. Ronan stepped back, nodding to the guards. Take him to the execution ground. We'll do this properly. The execution ground was a clearing behind the compound, a place traditionally used for formal pack justice. The entire assembly moved there in grim procession, David walking in the center flanked by guards. Ronan had chosen to do this himself. As Alpha, it was his right and his responsibility. Elena had offered to take the burden, but he'd refused. If he was going to order someone's death, he'd carry it out personally. They reached the clearing as the sun fully broke the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and red. David was positioned in the center, unbound but surrounded by pack members who would stop any attempt to flee. Ronan drew his knife, the same blade that had killed Kyle, cleaned and sharpened, but still carrying the weight of that memory. He approached David slowly, giving the man one last chance to say something, to apologize or explain, or show some shred of remorse. David just smiled. See you in hell, Alpha. Ronan struck fast and clean, the blade finding David's heart with practiced precision. The man's eyes went wide with shock, probably expecting something slower, more painful. But Ronan had promised himself he wouldn't make this about revenge or cruelty. It was just justice, quick and final. David collapsed, blood spreading across the ground. Ronan stepped back, letting the body fall, and waited until he was certain David was dead before cleaning his blade. The assembly was silent. Ronan turned to face them, meeting the eyes of pack members and foreign representatives alike. "It's done," he said simply. "The threat is ended. Justice is served." Margaret stepped forward, examining David's body with clinical detachment. Then she pulled out a small device and spoke into it, recording her official report for the council. "Death confirmed. Execution carried out according to pack law and council authority. No violations observed. This matter is closed." She looked at Ronan. "You handled this well, Alpha Blackwood. Better than many would have in your position." "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't make me come back here again." She tucked away her device. "The council will receive my report within the week. Expect a formal acknowledgement of your authority and a recommendation that other packs avoid antagonizing the Blackwood territory." It was as close to approval as the council ever gave. Ronan nodded his acceptance, and Margaret departed without further ceremony, already moving on to whatever other crisis demanded her attention. When she was gone, Ronan turned to the Crane Pack representative. "I don't want war with your pack." David acted alone, driven by personal grief. "As far as I'm concerned, this ends here." The representative, a middle-aged woman with David's dark eyes and a much more sensible expression, nodded gratefully. "We don't want war either. David was troubled, obsessed with the past. We tried to help him, but—" She gestured helplessly at the body. "This is on him, not on us." "Agreed. Go in peace. And if you ever need to discuss the border agreements, my door is open for negotiation." She left quickly, taking David's body with her for burial in Crane territory. The other pack representatives dispersed as well, murmuring among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Soon, only the Blackwood pack remained. Elena moved to stand beside Ronan, looking down at the blood-stained ground. "You okay? I've killed before. In combat, defending territory. This wasn't that different." "Felt different, though, didn't it?" Ronan thought about it. "Yeah, more personal, more final. That's because you cared about the outcome. Not just winning, but doing it right." She squeezed his shoulder. "That's growth, Ronan. Your father would have made a spectacle of this, drawn it out to terrify everyone into submission. You made it quick and legal and transparent. That's the difference." He wanted to believe her, wanted to think that Kael's death had changed him for the better, that he was becoming the kind of alpha his brother had died believing he could be, but standing there in the execution ground, covered in another man's blood, Ronan mostly just felt tired. "Come on," Elena said gently. "Let's get you cleaned up. The pack's waiting to hear from you." They walked back to the compound together, leaving the guards to clean the execution ground. By the time they reached the Great Hall, word had already spread. David Crane was dead, the threat was ended, the pack was safe. Ronan stood before them one more time, looking at the faces of people he'd sworn to protect. "It's over. The Cursecaster is dead, justice has been served, and we can finally move forward." "What happens now?" someone called out. One of the younger pack members, barely 20. "Now we rebuild. Not just physically, but as a community. We strengthen our bonds, improve our systems, and make sure nothing like this ever happens again." Ronan paused. "And we remember. Remember what was lost, what was sacrificed, and why we keep fighting to protect each other." He gestured to Kael's urn, still positioned at the front of the hall. "My brother gave his life for this pack. I intend to honor that sacrifice by being worthy of it, by leading with wisdom instead of just strength, by listening instead of just commanding, by building something that lasts." The pack listened in silence, absorbing his words. Then someone started clapping, the same pattern as before, slow at first, then building to a wave of approval. But this time, it felt different, less like relief and more like genuine support, like they were choosing to follow him, not just accepting his dominance. It was a start. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Jonas, David, and Tyler returned from exile, welcomed back with apologies and opportunities to prove themselves. The supply chain was overhauled, new security protocols implemented, and Seraphine began teaching basic protective magic to interested pack members. Ronan threw himself into the work, barely sleeping, constantly moving from one task to the next. Elena called him on it during a late-night strategy session. "You're running yourself into the ground." "I'm fine." "You're avoiding grief by staying busy. That's not healthy." Ronan looked up from the budget report he'd been reviewing. "What else am I supposed to do? Sit around crying about Kyle? Maybe actually process what happened? Talk about it with someone? Hell, take a day off and just feel your feelings for once." Elena's expression softened. "You can't lead effectively if you're held together by willpower and denial." "I'm not." "You are, and everyone sees it. You're doing better as an alpha, making good decisions, listening to people. But you're still not dealing with the fact that your brother died in your arms and your best friend betrayed you." The words hit like a physical blow. Ronan felt his carefully constructed control crack, and suddenly, the grief he'd been pushing down for weeks came roaring up. He didn't cry. Alphas didn't cry. His father had taught him that early. But he did something worse. He broke. Just collapsed forward onto his desk, head in his hands, breathing too fast and too shallow. Elena was there immediately, her hand on his back. "It's okay. Let it out. I've got you." "He's dead because of me," Ronan managed to get out. "Kyle. He died because I couldn't protect myself, couldn't see Marcus's betrayal coming, couldn't stop. Kale died because he chose to. He made that decision knowing what it meant, and he did it anyway because he loved you. Don't diminish that by turning it into your failure." "But if I'd been stronger, smarter, better, then he still would have died because the curse required a sacrifice and he chose to be it." Elena's voice was firm. "You didn't kill him, Ronan. You honored his choice by living. Now you need to honor it by actually living, not just surviving." Ronan lifted his head, looking at her through blurred vision. "How? By letting yourself grieve, by accepting help, by remembering that being strong doesn't mean being alone." She pulled over a chair, sitting down next to him. "Tell me about him, about Kyle before everything got complicated." So, Ronan did. He talked about childhood races through the forest, about the time Kyle had saved him from a rogue attack by creating a distraction despite being terrified, about quiet moments reading books side by side, about arguments over stupid things that seemed so important at the time. He talked until his voice was hoarse, and Elena listened without judgment or advice. Just listened, bearing witness to a relationship that had been far more complex and valuable than Ronan had ever acknowledged while his brother was alive. When he finally ran out of words, Elena squeezed his hand. "He was lucky to have you as a brother, even when things were hard." "I was lucky to have him." Ronan felt something in his chest loosen, just slightly. "I just wish I'd told him that." "I think he knew." "Maybe." Ronan hoped so. The seasons turned. Autumn gave way to winter, and the pack settled into new rhythms. The three formerly exiled boys became some of Ronan's most loyal supporters, working twice as hard to prove themselves worthy of the second chance. The supply problems were fully resolved, and no one went hungry even during the leanest months. Seraphine completed her research and prepared to leave, though she promised to return if the pack ever needed her expertise again. On her last night, she found Ronan in his office. "You did it," she said without preamble. "Did what?" "Survived the price. Most people break under the weight of what sacrifice costs. You bent, but you didn't break. That's rare." Ronan thought about the nightmares he still had, about waking up tasting copper and reaching for a brother who wasn't there. "I broke plenty. But you put yourself back together. That's what matters." Seraphine's glowing eyes studied him. "Your brother would be proud, I think, of what you've become." "I hope so. Trust me, I've seen enough death to recognize when it meant something." His did. She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The curse is broken, but curses leave marks. Scars, if you will. You'll always be more sensitive to blood magic now, more aware of it. That's not a weakness. It's a warning system. Use it." Then she was gone, disappearing into the winter night like she'd never been there at all. Spring came eventually, bringing new growth and the kind of hope that only follows surviving a brutal winter. Ronan stood in the memorial grove looking at the three urns positioned together, his parents and Kyle, a family finally reunited. "I'm trying," he said to the ashes, "to be better, To lead the way you would have wanted. Some days are easier than others. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and new beginnings. The pack's strong, stronger than it's been in years, actually. Elena's a good beta, better than Marcus ever was, though I probably shouldn't speak ill of him. Not here. Ronan paused. I think about what you said, about leading differently. I'm working on it. Still screw up sometimes, but I'm working on it. A wolf howled in the distance. One of the patrol members, probably. The sound was picked up and echoed by others, creating the complex harmonies that spoke of territory and belonging. I miss you, Ronan said quietly. Every day. But I'm not wasting what you gave me, I promise you that. He scattered fresh flowers. Kale's favorites, bright yellow things that looked too cheerful for a memorial grove, but somehow fit perfectly. Then he turned and walked back toward the compound, where his pack was waiting. Elena met him at the edge of the grove. Council sent a message. They want to discuss expanding your territory. Apparently word's gotten out about how you handled the David Crane situation, and they're impressed. Tell them I'm open to discussion, but not interested in expansion for its own sake. If the territory serves the pack's needs, fine. Otherwise, we're good where we are. She raised an eyebrow. Your father would have jumped at that opportunity. I'm not my father. No, you're not, she smiled. Come on, there's a packed dinner tonight, and if you skip it, I'm dragging you there myself. I wasn't going to skip it. Sure you weren't. They walked back together, arguing good-naturedly about responsibilities and work-life balance and whether Ronan actually needed to review every single budget report personally. It felt normal, comfortable, in a way things hadn't felt in a long time. The compound was lit up when they arrived, pack members gathering for the communal meal that had become a weekly tradition. Ronan had instituted it as a way to rebuild connections, to create space for people to just be together without the weight of pack business. He took his seat, not at the head anymore, but in the middle of the table, surrounded by his people, and looked around at the faces gathered there. Jonas and his friends still working to regain trust but getting there. The older pack members who'd served his father and chosen to stay with him. The children too young to remember the bad times, growing up in a pack that valued them. This was what Kyle had died for. This sense of community, of safety, of belonging. And it was what Ronan would spend the rest of his life protecting. Alpha? One of the children tugged on his sleeve. A little girl, maybe 6. Is it true you fought a witch? Where did you hear that? Everyone says, they say you were cursed and you broke it with magic and bravery. Ronan glanced at Elena, who was trying not to laugh. I had a lot of help. From very brave people who cared about the pack. But you're the bravest, right? Because you're the alpha. Actually, the bravest person I knew was my brother. He gave his life to save everyone here. The girl's eyes went wide. Like a hero? Exactly like a hero. She nodded solemnly, processing this information. Then she smiled and ran off to tell her friends, already embellishing the story in ways that would probably give Ronan a headache later. You're going to regret that, Elena warned. By next week, Kyle will be slaying dragons and rescuing maidens. Let them tell the stories. He deserves to be remembered as a hero. Ronan picked up his cup, raising it slightly. To Kyle. And to everyone who's ever sacrificed for this pack. To Kyle, the pack echoed, raising their own cups. They drank together, united in remembrance and hope for the future. Later, after the meal had ended and pack members were dispersing to their homes, Ronan walked the perimeter one last time. It was something he'd started doing every night, a chance to check boundaries, connect with patrol members, and just think. The northern territory spread out before him, dark forests and distant mountains limned in moonlight. His territory, his responsibility, his home. Somewhere in those mountains, Marcus was probably still alive, surviving as a rogue, or maybe finding another pack desperate enough to take in an exiled beta. Ronan hoped he was okay, despite everything. Hoped he'd found some kind of peace, but mostly he hoped he never saw Marcus again. Beautiful night, Seraphine's voice came from behind him. Ronan turned, surprised. I thought you left weeks ago. I did, but I came back. Figured I'd check on my favorite reformed tyrant, see how he's doing. She moved to stand beside him, looking out over the valley. You've done well. The pack's stable, the bonds are strong, and you haven't executed anyone in months. Progress. Was that last part a joke? Maybe. Her glowing eyes cut to him. The real question is, have you forgiven yourself yet? For what? For being human. For making mistakes. For not being perfect. She shrugged. Most alphas never do. They carry guilt like armor, thinking it makes them stronger. But all it really does is weigh them down. Ronan thought about that, about Kael and Marcus and all the decisions he'd made that seemed right at the time, but looked different in hindsight. I'm working on it, he said finally. That's all anyone can do. Seraphine started to walk away, then paused. Your brother was right, you are capable of being better. You just had to learn it the hard way. Most valuable lessons are learned the hard way. True enough. She smiled, sad and knowing. Goodbye, Alpha Blackwood. Try not to get cursed again. I'll do my best. She disappeared into the shadows, and Ronan was alone with the night and the distant sound of wolves singing. He stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of leadership settle over him like a familiar coat. It was heavy, sometimes unbearably so, but it was also his purpose, his calling, the thing that gave his life meaning. And now, finally, he was learning to carry it properly, not through dominance alone, but through wisdom earned in blood and sacrifice. Through the hard-won knowledge that real strength came from connection, not isolation. That being alpha meant serving the pack, not ruling over it. Kael had taught him that, had died teaching him that. The least Ronan could do was live worthy of the lesson. He turned back toward the compound, toward the warm lights and the sounds of his pack settling in for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ronan felt something approaching peace. It wouldn't last. Peace never did. But he'd take it while he could, hold on to it like the precious gift it was, and let it fuel him for whatever came next. Because that was what leaders did. They endured. They adapted. They protected what mattered, even when it cost them everything. And sometimes, if they were very lucky and very brave, they learned to do it with wisdom instead of just strength. Ronan Blackwood had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, but he'd learned it nonetheless, and it had changed him down to his bones. His father had ruled through fear. Kael had died teaching him a better way. And Ronan would spend the rest of his life proving that his brother's sacrifice meant something. The pack was waiting. The territory was secure. The future was uncertain but faced together. It was enough. It had to be enough. And somehow, standing there in the moonlight with the sound of his pack's voices carrying on the wind, Ronan found that it actually was.